Hi humans, welcome to the stream. Let's see. Oh no, I can hear myself. I just gotta mute Twitch, that's all. Oh, if I do that, I wonder if I can hear Momo. Yeah, I can hear Momo. Sweet. Yes. We don't lie. I push buttons. I don't know why my camera's blurry again now. That's gonna make me so mad. My camera's blurry again though. It hates me. I break it? Apparently, I'm too scary and broke it. Hi! Welcome, welcome, welcome. Everyone in chat. Maybe. Yeah, I'm gonna fight with it. It just hates me. Oh, crap. Okay, now you should be able to hear her. I forgot a button.
Hello.
I got too aggravated with the camera.
I was in a naughty corner.
Yeah, she was bad.
So what I was saying is, the cam thought Mono's beauty was too much to comprehend, so it had to blur her to,
Yeah,
to know
it hates me.
words. I don't know how to fix it either. We tried all the settings and...
I'll blame Twitch.
You blame Twitch? I mean, I've seen it before on stream as well, happening for you.
Yeah.
Doing pretty good, Snappy. I heard a follow earlier. I don't know. Was that you? Where's my activity? Ah, yeah. Thank you for the follow.
There. Da, 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 da. It was working right before we hit the button, I promised. And now it's not. I'm fighting with all the settings. So hi, Snappy. Hi, Rain. Welcome. And then I can hear myself. Oh, wait a minute. I know I can hear myself.
Why?
I'm listening to my own stream in my other ear.
Oh, you still had your
Yeah, I was checking the volume and everything at the same time, but I got so aggravated with the camera that I couldn't figure out why I could hear myself twice. We'll take that earbud out.
Too many new
problems.
things all at once. And Twitch is one, no?
Yes. Why does Twitch hate me though? Why is it making me blurry?
Is it really Twitch though?
Well, when I go to the browser on Twitch, it looks great. But when I go to OBS, Twitch looks horrible. Which is weird.
I'm checking stream now too. I gotta know now. Oh wow, that does not look great at all. Oh wait, it's on 3060p. That doesn't help. I'm gonna check auto quality. No. So yeah, that's not me. So that's.
I'll reconnect the properties, maybe.
PokeCatch. Mono.
Oh yeah, PokeCatch, guys. Bear with me a minute. I promise we're playing
Let's
Stardew.
see if that works.
Let me find the thingamajiggy. Properties.
Hi, Michigan. Hey, I should join in on the
properties.
On the mono-ness.
I
haven't worn these in forever.
I blame Twitch.
It won't fit with my headset.
Just like
Really?
put me in the seat. I blame Twitch because this camera
Maybe
looks great.
You mean the one in OBS looks great?
Yeah.
Well, what you can do then, if you
just
want,
crop mine and overlay it. I want it to work though, so I don't have to crop it and overlay it. But yeah.
You don't even have to crop it and overlay it. You can just go to the bottom and include my camera, and just have your normal camera layout. But you'll still have mine, and I'll just use yours. But we won't be next to each other like this.
Yeah,
but you could do it like that if it really bothers you. I get that it bothers you. I just don't know how to fix it either, because we already tried the auto.
Yeah, we tried both. All the settings we could find. Maybe my camera's dying. I don't know. But it looks great on Twitch, but also on Twitch I'm not full screen like you are.
I did just hear your audio full screen.
Huh.
Wait, why is there a big blob in my screen? Why is there a big square on my screen too? On my stream, there's a big What is this?
I don't know
what is going wrong. Twitch. Well, it's not showing up in my OBS.
I don't know.
Hey, Steckel.
There we go. It's still blurry when I capture from Twitch. That's so weird.
I need to open your stream to see what you're talking about.
I captured just my camera from Twitch.
Yeah, I just want to say. Oh yeah, I forgot. I heard your audio go bad as well. Is your internet stable right now?
I haven't dropped.
That's weird.
Let's see. Well, no, I did drop some frames, but I'm at 6,000 something kp. That's kbps, so.
A lot of kimonos, yeah. Kimono is dual wielding the cameras right now.
Yes. All the kimono inception.
So,
you know what?
Afro Rican says to you, "Hi Kimono, how are you, sweetheart?
Hi.
I hope you had a wonderful Christmas and New Year."
I did. Thank you so much. Now, I think we're just gonna do like Momo said. Can I turn off my camera or not include my camera?
Yes, in the web overview. Oh, Big Momo. Now I'm Big Momo on your stream. Hello.
Big Momo, she's taking over. No pressure.
So I don't know why, but there's a big square on my stream, and I don't know why it's there.
What did you do? There we go. We'll just put Momo in the corner.
I don't get it. It's only there when I press play.
So
and when I press pause, it's gone.
Now I gotta fix the game one.
Okay, this is so weird. Steve,
there's definitely some bugs.
What if I press load? Huh? I don't know.
She's
why
the star of my stream. Let's see.
Big square. Okay, so that works for you. That's great. Your account is normal again.
Now put us up here.
Oh yeah, you could do manually.
Yeah, I'm just putting us side by side, Vino.
And we can high five. Wait, this way?
Can we?
I don't know.
We tried this
Where's
earlier.
my hand?
You can
Where's
pull
mine?
your
Oh.
arm back. There you go. Pyaw. There we go. We did it. We high-fived.
I'm gonna have some delay, I think, now compared to you, probably.
Oh
But
no.
we'll see.
Let's see. Okay, game. Now I gotta capture Stardew because that's important.
Yeah, and I need to get rid of the huge square that I have in there. All the technical issues.
I see lots of kimono. Wow, Lady Rain getting lurks. Taking a break from the pixelated chaos will keep the farm running while you lurk. That's about true. Pixelated chaos. Oh, we get the bot twice. You're true.
Oh, I can turn it off. I could wait.
No, you're fine. You're fine. It's just funny because you get the frosty message because she hit lurk, and I get the frosty message.
Right. Oh,
no, you're good.
And
it's
they're
funny.
both different. They're both different because we have a different setup. That's fun. That we can compare them.
Right. And now maybe this thing will work with Zoom now. It works. I can zoom again. Okay, so I don't know why my Twitch camera wouldn't work, but we can just do it this way. Now that we got it worked out. That way you guys can see both of us clearly. And we're gonna do Meadowland Farms, which is vanilla mode, because I have not had a chance to install any mods or Vortex or anything. So we are.
I still need to check why I have a huge square on my screen as well.
Okay, well you work on that.
Yes.
I need to pull up your stream so I can see what you're talking about.
I don't know what it is. It's just in the middle of my screen. There's a big purple square.
Did you capture something weird?
It's not showing in OBS. Maybe that's left over from your camera. No, I don't know. Kidding.
Did you switch it to single camera?
Wait. No. I did now, but it's not doing anything different.
Weird.
It's weird. Like if I do.
Oh wow! Yeah, you got like a graphics card blip square.
Yeah, but it's in both my screens, so it's just showing up on my stream, not when I'm watching your stream.
Weird. It says I can join.
Weird today.
It says I can join your stream, but I think I already joined your stream. So
you did. You're the only one that has rights to join mine. So yeah, I don't know what that is.
Green rain. Yes. Hello. Hello. Welcome to the stream. We're working out this shared environment thing and seeing how many bugs we can find.
Yes.
It's going great. We're finding them all.
It's not even
gone. Not even part of your stream, is it?
No, it's not. I tried closing all the little. Okay, so now I closed my game capture. It's not gone.
What happens if you stop and relaunch? I hate to say that, but I wonder what.
Okay, I'm gonna try. Okay.
Yeah.
Hey, Stein, gonna be back in 1 second. You gotta
refresh. Yes, please refresh often.
Okay, I stopped streaming.
Okay.
Refreshing. And start streaming. Okay, refresh. Please be gone, magic square.
It's gone. Nope.
Yes.
Nope. Have you tried to unmute? It said click to unmute on it for a second. Oh, that was me. Why the heck is the purple
and it's
square
black
there?
again. I don't know. Is it the dice roll thing? I found it! It was oh my god! It was
a thingamajig. A thingamajig and stuff.
It was one of those pop-up things like that you have in the right part of your screen. It's an extension. And it was an
Oh,
overlay
okay.
somehow. I'm so sorry, everyone. Pro
Mm,
streamers right here.
yep. It's our first time.
Yep. We're new.
First time.
Okay,
Newbies.
I need to join your game.
Yeah. I gotta figure out how to not
Let's
cover up
see.
like everything. Let's see. But yeah, I think we're just gonna cover up a bunch of stuff and I don't care. Ah.
How are you doing, Stein? Is it the Meowlands? Mono?
There. Yeah. Meowland Farm.
There we go. So, as everyone can see, we're dual streaming or
Alright.
stream together thingy. We're gonna
I
be
did
playing Stardew
all my
Valley.
notifications and I forgot to include the URLs.
Fucked.
I know, right?
Oh
Pro.
no. I mean, people can go to your bio, I suppose. So.
Yeah. That or I can just comment my own URL. I don't know.
Oh yeah, you can do that. Why not?
Why not? They'll be like, what? Try.
Oh no, the picture you did of me.
You just now saw that, did you?
Oh, I almost killed our bed.
Don't kill the bed.
I right-clicked into the game. I know. Okay.
Not going, kitty. They're so cute. I can't click on them. Maybe because I gotta walk
Stein,
over
how
to
are
it.
you doing in Michigan?
Why is there a fish coming out of my cat? Is that a thing?
Why
Your
is
pets
there a
bring
fish
you food?
coming out of your?
I loved on the cat, and the cat gave me a fish. That just seems weird.
I guess that's what happens.
Nothing surprises me at the moment.
I had the Stardew sound. Okay, how did this work again? Stardew Valley, everyone.
How does this work?
Still working with the chat?
I believe so. I think they could both hear me 5 minutes ago, but when I was hearing double. When I was hearing double everywhere and could figure out why. I was like, oh my gosh.
I mean, I don't see any new chat coming in from your side.
No, I don't think anybody's talking.
Fucked it up.
I don't think anybody's talking on my side. Yo, there's a test. Did you get yo?
Yo?
No.
No, I have to do the start sharing chat again. There we go.
Oh, okay.
Because I stopped stream. There we go.
Okay. Are we sharing again? Okay, cool.
We shoot. Yeah. I just. Ooh, lightning. Do we have batteries yet?
Let's see. Test.
I think I did it for us both. Yeah, now it shows you again. Yay.
Oh.
Fixed. So when you said refresh, bleh, so refresh please, people on my side didn't see it. Because it was on your...
Was it? Oh, no, yeah. I typed in your chat.
Oh, you typed in my stream chat.
Yeah, I typed in your chat. Oh, it's 10 o'clock and this farmer has done nothing. Well, it's because it's raining outside. That's my excuse. It's raining outside. I didn't want to do anything.
We don't have any batteries yet, though, I think.
Oh my god, there's so many eggs and feathers and junk.
How does one go to inventory again? There we go.
Void eggs. Go with our void chickens.
It's a jinx.
So we have void chickens in this save and all the stuff. And I keep pickaxing everybody, so I hope they like it.
I
was
hope
trying
you
to
like
love
being
them.
pickaxed.
And instead, I'm hitting them with the pickaxe. I am such a loving person.
Mona's the best. Just so much Mono.
I'm destroying everything. Don't tell Rain.
It's fine. It's probably fine. I don't even know where we left off. Let me check the raccoons. I'm gonna check which state of raccoons.
Where are we at with the raccoons?
Yeah.
Dang eggs, they're everywhere.
There were
I
two
can't
of them
even walk.
already. Shit. Hungry. Need mushroom. Oh, we need 5. We need dried mushrooms and 5 cave. Dried purple mushrooms and 5 cave carrots.
5 cave carrots.
What are you telling Michigan? You're telling Rain? Shh. Shh.
Don't tell Rain. I didn't do it.
She was a good girl.
I didn't do anything.
But
I don't know what you're talking about.
Shit, I forgot we didn't have the purple, the mushroom cave. We have the fruit cave in this one. So we need to find purple mushrooms. I got
Story of my life. I didn't say anything. I didn't say anything.
Wasn't me. Let me just... I want to be able to see Mono too. There. Just hide this chat.
I think it's great that you get mysterious purple squares and I get a blurry camera. Plus, I was hearing myself twice, which was a lie. It was a lie.
Indeed. I guess I can just do the same as well too. That I can just have my own cam group, and then drag you above me, so that you're bigger. Yeah, because you're very tiny now.
I'm walking so slow because of no mods. It's so sad. I'm trying to remember where we put our cows. Oh, they're way over here. They're gonna get out. Gates open. They're gonna get out. We have pigs, so we have all the animals. I gotta make sure the bucket thingy's in here. Yay, it is in here. Oh, there's a wool thingy in there. Some shears.
Wait, it's not getting any tinier now, is it? Oh, it is. It's not. Now it is. Setting up stuff.
Get back here, goat. Do you love when the animals go to move as you're trying to milk them? They're like, run! She's got the bucket!
There we go.
And she means business.
Does she know? She means business.
Lit.
I came to your stream after a while and I saw other streamers say that, oh, she's changed a lot.
What?
That was on your... oh my god, it's on my screen.
Oh yeah, because am I first on your stream? No. Okay. Oh no, there's the purple squares on the screen too.
I came here after... Wait, it's on yours too? Or mine again?
Oh, yeah, you gotta turn it off on this scene. You only turn it off on the other scene.
No, that can't happen. Because it's on... Oh. I think everybody has to turn... I'm just gonna disable it in extensions. I think everybody has to disable it for themselves.
What?
Okay.
What
Hi there,
is it?
Lazarcrest! Welcome back! We're having some issues. We're trying to string together for the first time. Many technical difficulties. So you're probably seeing a big square somewhere there, or there, the side.
Big squares everywhere.
And it's in the extensions. I tried something new. I knew I shouldn't have, but hey, that's what we do. We click new buttons, we try new things, and stuff gets messed up.
I think it's cool that it combines our chats, though. That's pretty cool.
I love
that way
it.
People don't have to watch two chats.
Remember having to
when
we did multi-stream to check all the chats that were there.
Yeah. So does it count as double viewers then? Or do we get shared? Wow. We get shared viewer count?
I don't think we do.
Oh yeah, so shared viewers at the top of my thing. Shared viewers.
Where?
11. On my streamer dashboard. At the top of my dashboard on streamer dashboard.
I need more screens. 2 is not enough.
Gun show. Okay. You get gun show.
Okay, I can turn off my screen now. So how have you been, Laser Crest? Laser Crest. I just somehow want to say Lazarus when I see your name.
Got you, Ray.
Look at that gun show. Woo. Woo.
My heart's a flutter. Just kidding. No, I'm not conceited. It's just fun.
I remember telling you to put that in your redeems. You were like, oh no, please no. And now she's so confident with it. I love it.
I still get nervous. I really do. I just just go with it.
Welcome to me. I'm just trying to find what Mono said up dashboard. There we go.
I don't know if I need that or not.
My dashboard's just such a mess.
Oh, we need purple mushrooms, but I don't think we need red ones.
Oh, I see now. Yes. Purple shrooms. How are you doing?
So what are we gonna do? We gotta get purple shrooms, right? So we'll have to go to the...
I don't know where we left off. Like, let us check messages. Like, I was wondering why my game wasn't doing anything, but I was still a preview, full view of my stream. Everything's going so well.
It's because we added a couple extra screens to have open now. I purposely closed ones I normally use just so I didn't have to deal with it.
Yeah.
Oh, look, now my camera's blurry for you, Momo.
Yep, it is. It sucks. But at least you're sharp on your own stream, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's the most important part.
Exactly. Don't worry about me. If they want to see this, they gotta come over here.
Yeah, people can see who's talking. I like that, because normally on Discord you don't see who's talking and whatnot, and now you can.
Well, I'll probably... Once I get my other camera added, we can try again with my other camera. It could just be this
smart
922. It doesn't want to do it. I have wafer.
I mean, even my camera showed up a bit blurry.
Wiggles would be happy because he loves these. And I haven't tried the limit ones. I'm excited.
Oh, we need leaks for George. 12 leaks.
Somebody's gonna have to put those, fix those leaks.
Wait, what do you mean you don't hear Mono?
You muted me.
Really? I did not. I did not. You should be able to hear her over desktop audio.
Not if you muted the browser.
I did not.
If you muted the recording tab in the browser, you won't be able to hear me.
I did not. I didn't change it. I'm gonna check stuff out. Okay, Timmy. So you don't hear Mono at all? Wait, I can see. Wait, say something, Mono.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing.
You really can't hear her because she's showing up as it's registering her voice and her chippies.
My bad.
It's okay. What? That's so weird. maybe it's because my Stardew is too loud. I don't know. You didn't hear that nom 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 nom?
Weird.
It's like, huh? If that's the case, then last time you couldn't have heard my game sound either. And I, for a fact, know you guys did. So.
Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Is it bouncing on your OBS when I talk?
Yes, very much, a lot. How can he not hear it? I'm gonna test it myself.
Oh,
Maybe
it's 2 a.m. We just died.
Oh fuck!
Forgot we were playing a game.
Yep. I'm gonna test on my own, like if I can hear it. When I enter, if I go to my
Mono didn't make it to bed. It says Mono. Mono. I hear you, Mono. I'm glad. But yeah, it's on Momo's stream that she says they can't hear me.
He's right. Why? My precious. Strange.
I blame Twitch.
And before,
I saw people using this and it working. They were not using cameras though. Maybe they were just in Discord voice.
Could be.
We could go over to Discord voice. Then they could hear us, no problem.
Oh, and just use the cams from the. I mean, we could.
Mm-hmm.
We could. I hope it's going to be synced then, though.
Our mouths might not move the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe. Wait, Mono, did you mute yourself? Did you mute yourself in the?
Check mic. Testing 1 2 3. 1 2 1 2 3 1 2 3.
No, in the pop out.
I'll turn off noise, echo.
No, if your mic is on and your mic is on, then it's on my side. But just checking because I can hear you, so it shouldn't be. But
I don't know how to check that. It doesn't look like it's muted.
Okay, I'm checking things, Timmy. Thank you for telling me, because if nobody had told me, I didn't know. I wouldn't have known. It's not like I have a different, like, I have
Let's try this one now.
I have a different power source for, audio source for the web browser. Or for the, words are hard. Control audio on OBS, there we go. And then I'm just gonna do that. Stream together. Can you, oh. Wait, now where's Mono Mike? Where's Mono? Okay. Can you talk a bit, Mono?
Maybe. Testing 1 2 3. Testing 1 2 3. Oh, I could just hear myself somewhere, and I don't even know where.
It's probably over my headset when I turn. Sorry.
Oh no! It's like I hear double again.
Oh man. By the time we're playing this game, it's gonna be like, it's already 12, like midnight here.
It'll be fine. It's fine.
It's fine. We can sleep. We can sleep tomorrow. Oh my god. Okay. I'm just gonna try and fix things. Stream together, no. So I don't want that audio anymore because it's not doing things.
I just ran around the house like a crazy person. Okay.
Neighbors can see you. Just gonna refresh it. Refresh cache.
I'm singing.
Oh.
No, this is that from what? The Elf? When he goes, I'm singing. I don't remember. Maybe it's Elf that I'm thinking of.
Singing, right? Maybe.
Yep. Now, settings microphone is connected, set to Yeti. When I do a test, I can hear it. It has noise suppression on, echo on.
I know what it is.
What? Browser tab?
I was still on monitor only. Because I was testing the audio before and I didn't switch it back. It's working! We technologied.
Can you hear me?
It wasn't me fault. You can say hi to Timmy now. Yeah.
Hi, Timmy. Again. You probably didn't hear me last
everybody.
Time.
This is how I feel after that. I wonder if it works.
Do we need to riot? There you go. We need to riot. And we can hype that everything's working, at least to some degree.
Exactly. Okay, now I can do that.
Other than I'm fuzzy because Twitch hates me.
I still don't get why. And you're 100% okay on your stream, right?
Yeah.
Like, let me check.
Because the camera works fine on my screen. It just doesn't want to do the virtual camera business.
For fuck's sake.
I can try.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah, it's fine on yours.
Scene. Let me try changing it.
What? Wait, you got a leak at your house? I was doubting if you said you had to go to the toilet or your house is leaking. I hope you just have to go to the toilet, but it's probably the first. Where I hope it's not too bad. I mean, with Timmy, you never know. He overshares. Oh no!
No, the leak is in my apartment.
Oh no! Okay. What you numbing? Okay, I'm ready for the
lemon wafers.
Lemon wafers.
So good. I'm going to be eating the whole bag if I don't put it away.
Okay, I'm just gonna. Not the first time. Oh, it's a common thing. Sorry to hear. That sucks.
Hope you get it fixed soon.
Can't do that if I don't talk.
Also, I'm ready whenever you are. I think. Oh, she muted herself again.
I clicked on mute. Damn it. Okay, now I'm not stopping. Now I'm stopping. I'm stopping. I'm not touching stuff again. Oh, we lost monies. Wait. Mona tried to catch me with a rod, and I axed at her. Oh my, she caught me.
Tried kissing you, but apparently you're not my wife. I don't even know who I'm romancing.
I don't think. Are we?
Elliot, I think, in this one, but I think I want to change it. I was romancing Elliot.
Right, Sebastian! I get Sebastian. Oh, we got some lightning, and I got my doggo.
I don't know very much in the way.
I'm not allowed to axe Mono. I will axe her anything I like. No. I get you.
Could romance Crowless. That's the other one everybody wants to romance. Ooh.
Ooh. Willie has
I
got
gotta
something
remember.
at the beach.
Hey, there's batteries. You wanted batteries.
I didn't put them there. Did you? Oh no, I have no idea. Linus stole our money.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Egg
Dang,
Festival
Egg
tomorrow.
Festival.
Oh.
I don't think anything got stolen from my pockets. I think I'm good.
I mean, we lost some money. Oh, from the pockets. I don't know. No, still full.
You know, Holodex. No, hi, Silent.
I forgot what all the chests were. Oh, okay. There.
Don't we need the batteries for something? Do we need them for the bus? Or we
I
already
don't
did
know. I just golden nuts. Wait, I have a golden nugget. Does that count? Oh no, that's copper. That's too low. That's too lowly for Mono. She needs gold.
Oh, no, we don't need batteries for the bus. Do we need it for the tunnel?
I don't know what we need it for. I just thought it was storming, so I was like, hey, we need to get batteries.
I found a leak. No offense to anybody who's having leaks, but I found a leak.
Wait, what? I think it has something to do with the laundry machine. Oh, it's not from the rain?
Worked. A lockbox swing
it's
a bit inside. There's
leak?
a note. First task, bring a rainbow shell to the train platform. Leave it in the box for Mr. QI.
A rainbow shell?
We need a rainbow shell for QI.
I don't know what that is.
A rainbow shell? We get it on the beach, I guess. The rainbow colored, the blue.
Really?
Spiraling.
I've never had this quest. First time I'm hearing it.
I had to put the battery in the secret wall place in the cave tunnel. In the tunnel thing, you know, the bus goes through the tunnel.
No.
Well, in the tunnel, there's a thing on the wall that you put a battery in.
I'm gonna look. Can I look at it? Wait.
Yeah, follow me.
Okay. Wait. Okay.
I'll show you.
Yeah. Okay. You forgot you need batteries for the advanced stuff you make and build. Yeah. At some point.
This way.
I mean, I'm not really a newbie, but I've never played it long enough with the same person to advance in the game. Yeah, never been here.
See, if you walk by with your glow ring, you see this little panel on the wall, and it asks for a battery, and I put a battery in.
That's so cute. Oh, can't walk there.
Yeah, we can't walk to the desert, unfortunately. But yeah, the QI stuff, he'll just keep giving you a new task each time you complete a task until you get to meet him. And then once you get to meet him, you get to do other things too. Oh, started a newbie.
That's not the wizard, is it? Kiki.
Oh, I forgot to get craft directly from the table. I don't need anything.
With cover rain, 4-player world. No clue when that was.
Long time ago. Pupper! I gave your pupper some loves.
Thank you.
Hi, kitty. Kitty loves. Over 3 years ago? That was when Momo was like super famous.
What? No.
You were?
3 years, I think. I was still on my hiatus. Because my GPU was dead.
Oh, was it 4 years ago then you were super famous?
Ow! Not super famous.
You were. I was like,
I think
I want to be like Momo.
I think it was 2019, 2020? Like
20 at least.
So it's like, oh yeah, okay, well we just hit 2025, but
yeah. Momo was super. Was it Quake you were playing?
Yeah.
Like,
I played loads of Quake Champions.
I go over to her channel and she had like 75 viewers.
Well, a friend of mine kept raiding me with loads of those.
And that's how it works.
I once got raided by Quake itself.
Oh, that's cool.
Well, it was cool, but it was very scary too because they just hit me
yeah.
with 600 viewers.
It freaked me out. I would
suddenly
die.
having 600 people watching you is like.
Yeah, I think the most I've had is like 400. And that was enough to make me sweat because my internet was crappy that day too. Because Comcast was.
Oh yeah.
I was waiting on Comcast to do repairs, and it was an event, so I couldn't like reschedule.
Oh no.
Yeah, I was so mad that my internet was not working well that day.
I think when the 600 viewers came in for me as well, my computer was not able to transition either. You can see that the stream started like being jittery and whatnot. Oh yeah, I got raided by Quake. I think they were doing like an event, and they just picked a streamer that was streaming Quake Champions, and I was one of the lucky ones. I was the lucky one, but yeah.
I don't want to eat the truffle. I just want to love on the animals. Oh, dang it, I ate the truffle.
That was definitely very interesting. Who put the... Mono, did you put those those flares there?
I don't know. What are you talking about?
Mono's being a brat again. She's being like, nah, I'm gonna put empty bushes everywhere. Nah. The Momo can't.
Only for Momo. Only for you, Momo. Shane's gonna lurk. Thank you, Shane, for the lurk. No die, Momo. She's like, or pass out or whatever. Oh, there's Rain's cat. I forgot that cat existed.
Oh, you scared me. I was like, what?
It's Puddles. He's so cute.
Right. Oh, they have a new recipe, Timmy, for the Lay's chips. I didn't have the new paprika or bell pepper. Do you call it paprika or bell pepper? The flavor.
They're two different things.
Yeah. You have Mono?
We have paprika, we have smoked paprika, and then we have whole solid bell peppers.
Smoked paprika, that one.
The spice, yeah.
The spice, yeah, it's the spice. We just call it paprika because that's basically what we, call the flavor.
Can we look to see if we had any... Oh, what is it that George wanted?
Leeks, and I have like 6. Oh, I have spring onions.
Oh, he wanted spring onions.
I don't know, how do I go? Oh, wait, it was F? Yes.
There's one in here.
No, he wants leeks. Never mind. He wants leeks.
Okay.
I don't have leeks. Just gonna put the spring onions in there. I don't think we need them.
Gold leek. I have 2 leeks to give him. Do we each just give him 1 or how many? I was like a lot in it.
No. Yeah, he wanted 12.
Yeah, he ain't getting my leeks.
we have
I don't have 12.
We have 17. We have 17 days, so we could put them in the pink one. Okay. Like the event, this one.
I'll put them in, and if we get the total, then we'll give it to him. If not, don't waste them.
Don't give him. Yeah, exactly.
He ain't getting them.
I have so much crap in my inventory, and I don't know why it's in there.
Me too. Keep collecting stuff, and I'm not sure why. In the recycle machine somewhere.
Why do I have this ring? There it is. Immunity ring, I have a glow ring and a magnet ring. I guess I was switching them out when playing.
Maybe.
I have a lash dandelion.
Maybe.
It's a lash of the season.
Oh, I wonder if we can make escargot if we put the snail in the fridge.
I will make you escargot.
Uh-oh, I don't know which fridge this belongs in. Maybe the one with the fish. Rain has like specific fridges built in here, so...
Look them all! I mean, they're ours.
But there's nothing with fish in it. None of them have fish in it.
I have all the fish.
Oh, okay. Well, there's not a single fridge with fish in it in my house. I'm like, what? Okay, I'll put the snail in that one. Loot them all!
Bulky catch!
A wild catch, yes.
Heliolisk? Heliolisk?
Friday the
You know,
13th to get over 1,000 views. It's crazy. Rain been organizing? She does. She does organize.
Wait.
Rain does organize when she plays.
Wow, I didn't even see that, Silent Rogue. I missed that chat. That's amazing. Definitely.
I feel like I
was
gotta
organizing
organize my
stuff.
thoughts.
Yeah, I know. My thoughts are everywhere too. I can't.
We have no focus.
No focus. Our focus needs more focus.
Yeah. I need to find out what Krobus likes, because I want to romance Krobus, but I don't know what he likes.
Thank you, Tim.
Not a rush. I'm just sitting here. I'm gonna do a thing. Because Silent, the one of the things came that you sent me. So one of the Amazon gifts for my wish list.
Wait, what did you send?
Let's see. It's very related to what we're. It's the bag. I gotta open it. It's a gift.
I forgot to water some crops.
Well, most of them should be watered because they have sprinklers.
Most of them, yeah. Some parsnips died.
But it's so appropriate for this game. Thank you.
I want to see.
I got the Stardew Valley cookbook.
Cute.
It was on my wish list for like ever and ever and ever. And then now it's got all these recipes. So here, see if I can hold this pumpkin soup. And there's like, you know,
that's so adorable.
And then I'm trying to flip and view at the same time. Winter. Oh, there's like winter. They have like winter recipes and stuff. That's cool.
Ooh.
It's by season.
Oh, it's 12 a.m. almost.
Oh, yeah. Pizza. Stardew pizza. Waiting to make these. So yeah, so maybe I'll do some streams and like cook from this book and cook Stardew stuff because that would be so cute. Stir fry from Stardew.
Oh, Mona's already in bed.
Yeah, I got in bed to open this because I didn't want to cause any problems.
Smart. Such a smart lady.
There's ginger ale. Oh, look. Maki rolls.
There's a ginger ale recipe in there?
Yeah, there's ginger ale.
That's so cool.
You saw it? You saw the ginger ale? I don't know.
No, you read it out loud.
Tropical curry. There's just all kinds of cool things. And the artwork is like just amazing in here. I love the there are some real photos too, a little bit. There's a crab cake.
Oh, that's cute.
Crab cakes. Yeah. It's the little chickens and the crabs and stuff in the photo. It's adorable. I love all the little Stardew. Oh my gosh, it's Stardew chocolate cake!
Mono's enjoying it.
Stardew chocolate cake, guys.
Gift. Was a very good
gift.
gift.
Stardew cookbook, and I've been holding out. I just got it as a gift. I just opened it. I just got it as a gift. It's been on my wish list forever. Yes, we could do a dual stream and cook from this cookbook.
Ooh.
Or like a live stream or whatever.
Like 2 recipes at the same time.
Or when she comes visit, she can cook with me and we could do a stream live, cooking in the kitchen with Mona and Rain.
Yeah, that would be fun.
Cooking in the kitchen. Lucky Star lunch. I bet they use star fruit for that.
Maybe. Or maybe
like a star fruit salad. But it is not. See. Mango sticky rice. Yeah, this stuff is definitely stuff out of the ordinary for me, which is great. Pink cake. All the pink cakes in here too.
Oh, right. There's a pink cake recipe.
Right? Radish salad. I love the little Junimos throughout, though. They're so cute. Da, da, da. Survival burger. We need to make a
is that
survival
from
burger.
Linus? Is that Linus's one?
I remember. Yeah, Linus. Linus is it tells you who it's from.
It's survival burger.
And a message. Yeah. That's so cool,
that's
though.
cute.
Okay,
Wait, your mom sends it in game?
We'll have to do some of these live, but yeah. Starting.
Very cute.
Add them to your digital book. Yes, you can take as many pictures from my book as you want.
What book? I want to see your yearbook.
No.
You didn't specify what book. It's sent in a post. I forget all of that stuff.
Yes, thank you again. Yeah, I'm waiting for the other thing you got off my wish list too. It's not here yet.
Us. Oh, the spirit are somewhat annoyed today. It's gonna be a clear sunny day all day.
Oh my gosh, look at the wine.
You sent her all the stuff, Silent Rogue. Is that
cauliflowers.
Oh, it's jelly.
No, I already picked
jelly
the wine.
belly.
I skipped the jelly. You can have the jelly. I wanted the wine.
Mono. Oh, that's where the honey goes, right?
In the beehive, yes.
Yes. No, that's where the honey goes. Wait, where did we decide
to pick up beans? I guess there are no beans.
Oh yeah, and all the cauliflower. Bean.
I think we're.
Oh, the cauliflower's not done yet. Never mind. This one is.
I can hand you a cauliflower.
Oh, the piggy. Are they hungry?
Do we still need stuff for the community center? We do. Need apples.
I didn't. Did you feed them last night? I didn't.
No. We need one of those truffle mushrooms, though, for the museum.
I found a truffle, so...
Yeah, we need that
if that's the one you...
Mm-hmm. And I need to go make a maki roll.
Is it?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah. It's a fungus. A fungus among us.
Is it a fun guy, though?
Beans aren't ready yet. I know. Oh, we gotta go do an egg hunt too.
Oh shit. How's your inventory? I'm good, I think.
I'm looking at maki rolls. Oh, I haven't unlocked maki rolls yet. Dang it.
Are the creatures auto-fed right now?
No.
Oh shit. Okay, well.
We don't have any mods. We don't have any mods, though. You know what?
No, but if they have a feeder and there's hay, right? It should.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure how it worked again. Do I sell the salmon berry jelly?
Yeah, make money.
Okay.
Go for it.
Money. And all the silver ones too, right?
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Okay, so not the truffle, because we need that.
But we need to go do the Easter egg hunt.
Yeah. Let's go.
Me, I'm not selling my wine. Give it back.
Well, you need to get here on time then, Rain, because it's starting right now.
Posture check? Okay. Drink water? Got you. Water?
Wait, I don't see those.
Maybe because they're only on my stream? Maybe?
Oh, maybe. Did you see my posture check earlier? I guess you didn't.
I didn't.
That's why. Cool. We're finding out all the things about the stream together, so some things are separated and others aren't. It's kind of cute.
Yay, we made it to the egg hunt.
You want a plush bunny?
Yeah, buy what you want.
Oh. Well, we have to be careful with the money, though. Do we need strawberry seeds?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay.
I don't even know how much money we have.
We have over 9,000. It's nearly 100,000.
Okay, I'm buying the banner then, because I love the banners. You can buy the bunny if you want the bunny.
I'll buy the bunny. I'll buy the bunny.
Stardew takes a lot of focus for me, and I don't have the capacity for it after work. I'm sorry, Rain. I hope you get to feeling better.
It's okay. Stretch.
We're here to entertain you.
Ooh.
Some of these eggs were laid this morning. See, they're still warm. It kind of grosses me out.
What?
I don't know.
Oh yeah, I see that.
Gonna need hot sauce for eggs, kid.
Woo! I am not running, Timmy.
Oh,
it was a sound.
Take a raven's egg. They'll hold a grudge against you for the rest of their days.
No, it's okay.
Eggs and leek for breakfast. I'm in a good mood. Ooh, eggs and leek is what he likes.
You just want to try. That's fine. It's there for trying and for having fun with. I just forgot. I keep forgetting I have those sounds added.
The most delicious eggs.
Do you have hens on your farm? Yes. And cocks.
There are no males on the farm. We just have
never mind.
Mysterious egg hatcheries.
Timmy's pushing all the buttons on my stream. All the sound effects are flying around my ears.
Yeah, I could see some of the bleep ones show up, but that's it.
Oh, you do?
I saw one that says,
the blurb. Yeah.
Because it's a bot. Yeah. I need to get my photo taken at the bunny stand. Does my hair look okay? No.
Hydrate. Oh. I'm out of drink.
This year I sewed little pants and hats for some of the eggs. They look adorable. You know, I think this is the first time I've actually read some of the Easter messages. I usually just click through them as fast as I can and I don't actually read them.
Same.
I want to live inside a big egg.
I forgot if I got everyone. I think I did.
Yeah. Hunted for slime eggs? Yes, I have hunted for slime eggs.
I think that's everyone.
Do you think I'm too old to do the egg hunt? No, never, Abigail. Yes,
exactly,
never.
So.
I'm still having fun. Why stop? Exactly. Do what you love. Don't let somebody tell you you're too old.
That depends, though, Silent. If she was streaming, she'd probably skip through it too.
You're trying to be the back room deal, huh? Haha, admire your gumption.
Oh!
I'm like, no, I just want to talk to you.
Now I feel like having something. I have pretzel sticks. Yum, 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 yum.
Eggs are fine, but I advise against eating 30 per day. Who's gonna eat 30? Oh, I'm sure I did on my first playthrough. But that was like before I even streamed. Are we ready for an egg hunt?
Yeah.
Think so.
Let's do it.
This whole posture thing has got to be reorganized. Because my keyboard's too high. I don't have the wrist thingy. One day I'll figure it out.
One day.
Oh, Rain's not here. That means one of us will win.
Yep.
Poke catch.
Uh-oh. Ah. Yes, my button wasn't working anyway. A spoink! Spoink! Okay, let's catch all the eggs, guys.
Set.
Go!
Ready, set, go. Phoebe.
Yes. It's the end again. Oh, they're standing in front of me. Go away.
I don't even know where all the eggs are.
She saw it too.
She stole my egg.
Well, we're going the same direction, Chet. No, no. Wait, I can't reach it from this side. Get it.
I don't want it. You touched it.
Mono has ickies. Go ahead. Take it then.
I've never been in somebody where we both walk the same direction the whole time.
We just have the same general idea of where we want to go.
Right. Usually everybody scrambles and goes opposite directions, but no, not me and Momo.
Yeah, twinsies.
We got 10 seconds left and we have nothing to show ourselves.
I see one.
Win.
I have 5 eggs.
I have 5 as well.
It's a tie.
Or is she gonna kick our butt? She's gonna kick our butt because we were just like running into each other.
Probably Abigail. Freaking Abigail.
It always shows up for me last.
Really?
I think because I'm the host, like, I get a delay. Because I have to wait for everybody to click OK and then it registers.
Oh, maybe.
I think even when we hit start on the egg hunt, there might be a slight delay.
Oh, you got the spoink, Mono.
Did I what?
You caught the spoink.
Oh, okay. I was like, what? I don't know what you're talking
What's
about.
wrong now?
I've heard of a squeak in our Stardew.
A spoink.
Momo, you're making crunchy noises.
I'm sorry. I was laughing and I still had the pretzel in my mouth. I had to choose to chew or breathe.
I'm
sorry.
No, I'm messing with you. Multitasking is hard.
So we also found out that, yeah, they're auto-fed. We have the auto-feeder. It's fine.
Oh, you're in there. I was like, who left the can open?
Me. Yeah, we don't have to worry about the feeding.
How was the holidays?
So, yeah.
Good.
Ooh, Xmas, yeah, all good, all good.
Good. I streamed
Mono
New
had a
Year's
fun
Eve.
stream. Sadly, I couldn't join in.
Because you were out partying.
Yes, she did.
Or asleep. I don't know. It was a good stream.
So, in pre-stream, we figured out that the noise suppression isn't that great. Well, when using this, so you can hear all the crunches.
Yeah, we're just... And not that you don't hear them anyway on my stream, but... Trying to get around all these guys to get dang eggs.
How was your Christmas and New Year's, Tim?
Yeah.
No, I wanna sleep with Mono. It was nice. Mono, 1 a.m.
Okay, time go see peace.
Mm.
Maybe. It was nice. Oh, rain's cats in our bed. Puddles. I'm so surprised.
Achoo! Achoo! Mono
Thanks
and
for
me
the
just
lyric,
gonna be in a
Silence.
sneezing break. Mono and me are both allergic to kitties.
I'm allergic to myself.
Yeah. So am I. High five. Where are you? High five. I don't know where it is anymore. Oh wait, we're on top of each other on mine. Put your hand down.
We're covered. We just need one hand for each side.
Wait, where are you? Is this correct for your screen?
No. That's the
This
other
way?
side. That way, yeah.
Okay, that way. And for me, you're there. So it's gonna be like,
Oh.
because you're on top of me. Yeah, I'm getting hip pets from Mono.
Yes.
All the head pets.
So it's stacked on yours?
It's stacked, yeah. Because mine is usually just in yeah, on the left side, mid left.
Oh.
And I stacked you on top of me. Quack, quack. I should stop munching. Making too much noise.
It's okay. I'm making just as much noise. I don't care if you eat.
I mean, I had D&D today, so I already had so many snackies and pretzel sticks. Tomorrow begins the 3-day festival on the Calico Desert. Free food, prizes, and much more. I've never done this one.
It's fun. Emily is hilarious, so make sure you visit Emily each time.
Okay. Open the door. Oh, there's many things ready.
Lots of cauliflowers. We're on day 14. We could actually plant some seeds if we wanted to.
I mean, the greenhouse is full of them.
Yeah.
Full of
seeds?
Crops. Oh no, squash and hot peppers and...
Yeah, I just picked a slew
again?
of
Kale?
cauliflowers down here in the garden.
Nice. But there's open spots for that have sprinklers, so we could plant stuff here. That's what I meant.
We're making cauliflower jelly. Just kidding.
You got a fruit present? What did you get? And what did you give them? Because it's not about receiving gifts. It's also about gift giving. It's a season of enjoying each other's company.
Seeds. We can plant
Oh, there's so many... Mono, there's so much produce in here as well. In the chests of the greenhouse.
Oh, okay. So we could use those to bring them down here and make jelly and stuff.
We could. I don't know if anybody saved them for a reason. I'm just...
Oh, they might just need to stay up there. Yeah, they might need to stay up there.
Really?
Is it summer? Or... Is it summer?
I mean, eggplant, broccoli, corn, and summer squash, yeah.
No.
Why?
It's spring. Because I was trying to plant summer crops. It's spring now.
There's a... Okay.
It's spring. I couldn't plant them. I tried.
What's this thing? Is that a seed maker? Is it? Wait, we can make seeds from the leeks if you have them.
Bit of fireworks. Well, I shared the present for her son and his girlfriend with my girlfriend.
You shared the present for her son? Huh?
Meow.
Okay, you gave her a lottery ticket. Uh-huh. And you shared what now? You shared the present. Ah, wait, I get it. Okay, so you and your girlfriend got her son and his girlfriend a present together. Yeah. Sorry, that was very confusing.
Yeah.
I get it now.
Let's see.
Hack.
Onion.
Hack. I
Oh, we need
always need
5
to imitate
apples.
the ducks because they're so cute.
We need 5 apples or something ridiculous. No, we need
4?
3 apples. Need 3 apples.
Why can't I put the bait in the crates?
You gotta right-click properly?
I tried that, Mono. Clicking with all the buttons. Oh no.
Click it the right way. I don't know.
Left and right way. I can't do it. I'm giving up.
That's fair. I don't know what you gotta do.
Okay, individual.
I don't know what you gotta do. It's being weird.
Yeah, I get it. No, it's fine to me. I know English is not your first choice of language to use. But you're doing well. It's just hard because I'm trying to interpret it from the Dutch way as well, and then the English way, and then it just gets. What did you do?
My foot's asleep because I sat on it.
Ouch. Oh, I forgot to fill the things for the jelly. Sorry.
Oh, you're fine.
What does corn make us? Is it gonna be like corn something? Like, wait, no, that's a gold one. Can you put parsnips in there? We can. Let's see what the parsnips give us.
I wonder if the level of the mine has purple mushrooms.
Oh, you got some home slippers. Nice. Is it the fluffy ones? I love how we both went one way and then rethought our steps, and we were like, no, I need to go the other way.
I don't think we know what we're doing. It's all good.
It's all good. It's all good, man. We were selling the silvers. Oh wait, I still have some chili peppers that can be made into stuff, right? I think that's what we're doing with it. Fluffy ones. Sippy? That's the cat, right? Honk honk. I thought... Just how many chili peppers did I have? There we go. Taters. Hey, taters. Yep, the cat one. Nice. Periwinkles.
Gathering all the resin for crafting.
There we go. Was this a trash? Which one was a trash thing again? Was that a television thingy? Mono?
Huh?
Which one was a trash compactor? Was it a television looking thingy?
Yeah, the thing with like 2 eyes is a recycler.
Oh no, that's different. Yeah. Then those are still open. Oh, that's the diamond converter thingy, right? Loom. Do we even have a loom yet?
In both barns.
Oh, you shared the lighter on Discord? Let me check. ACDC. Nice. It's a nice simple lighter. Where did we put
Wild
honey?
Pokemon.
I don't know where to put the honey.
Somewhere. You can put it in with the. I think the second yellow trunk near my house, if you want.
Okay.
I think that one's got jarred stuff in it.
No. Yeah, milk and goat milk. Maybe the other one? No. Oh, do you mean inside the house?
No.
Outside. I can put it in there, it's fine.
I don't know, you can put it wherever, or put some in your house too.
No, that's fine. Oh, I see it. It's, no, that's the resin stuff.
Where are the purple mushrooms?
Right, that's what we needed to find.
Yeah, it said level 81 when I looked it up, but I don't know if it was right. Because it wasn't the Stardew Wiki.
Just have a common mushroom. Late enduring. Oh, you got even more presents?
Got a note.
Jimmy got spoiled.
I don't see any mushrooms.
What's the song you have? I got the Medicham, whatever that is.
Excuse me.
KimonoKat.
Coffees. It's cold in here, so it's making my sinuses act up.
Don't get a cold. Do you do the lift as well? Sebastian's on his motorbike! I was just about to head out.
But it's a red one, not a purple one.
I want to show you something. What's gonna happen with me and Sebastian?
Ooh.
We're riding into the night. Ah!
Look at you two. Hi, Randall. Welcome to the stream. I hope you're doing awesome.
Romantic. He's showing me the city from a cliff.
Aww.
That's Zuzu City in the distance.
Oh, there's a baddie. What the gang gonna do?
Remember when I want to get away from everything and just think.
Do you drop mushrooms? Because I need them. Sure, I need them. I don't want void essence. I need mushrooms.
So what do you think? It's kind of ugly. You should quit smoking, or it gives me a strange, sad feeling, or it's beautiful.
He gave me a copper bar. Interesting.
What should we tell him, guys?
You want to date him, so yeah. Something, whatever you think he's gonna like.
I'm not gonna tell someone that you started dating when they're smoking to stop smoking. That would be weird. Because you knew they smoked before you started dating.
I don't remember what the answer is with him.
Oh, damn. It's
I don't
beautiful.
remember. Keep finding gold.
Oh, you don't lift? Oh, okay. Oh, hi there, Randora. Or what is it?
Randall.
Randall Rave of Jacks? I'm ClumsyMomoro. Hi.
I'm Randall.
Oh no, it was the wrong answer, Timmy. Mona, we have to go a day back. No.
We can't go to bed. Oh no. Do we need to restart?
I mean, I don't usually bring girls to this place. In fact, you're the only one. He's blushing. You know what I'm trying to say, don't you?
She is a bit much. It's beautiful. Oopsie.
Oh, he's talking about his girlfriend. Okay, hi, Rando. He kissed me! I almost missed it!
You weren't watching and you almost missed a kiss.
I was reading chat.
Slacker.
She's calling me a slacker.
I feel like making some gold bars.
Oh. And then he just leaves me there. He kisses me and he leaves me outside of his door. He didn't even bring me home. Get me for the kiss. You can say Clumsy. You can say Momo. Whatever you do, don't... Oh, it's 2 a.m. Great, great. Sebastian should have dropped me off at my own place.
He just left you on the woods to pass out after that answer you gave us.
Yeah. Wow. It would be great if I opened a letter that says Sebastian brought you home because you fainted on the motorbike. No. I'm eating gummy bears. Your favorite, Mono. The Haribo ones. I think we did lose money. Wait, that event, did it do something? My boyfriend!
Oh, today's the event.
Right. Oh, your mic cut out again.
Mike?
1,000 gold! Sebastian, your date cost me so much. And then, oh my god, Evelyn wants even more leagues for George now, besides the quest that we got.
Oh, Marnie has a daughter. Is that what that's supposed to mean?
Daughter?
Or is that a baby Shane? But it looks like a daughter.
I don't know. I can see your game.
I mean, she does have a daughter because Shane has a sister.
I didn't want to pick up the crab pot. What? Don't the crab pots need bait? I'm so confused. They don't, maybe. Oh, a sunshine. Wait, a STD from kissing? Wait, can you? I guess you can. I guess cold sores are considered an STD, right? I hope he didn't give my character an STD.
Oh, now he just wants one leak. I can handle that.
It looks like we're in the same room. Wait, Mono, let's do the thing again.
What?
High five, Mono. Yeah, and I have to go here because Mono's on top of me. Yeah, the kiss did cost me 1K. How's it going? I'm doing well. I'm enjoying multi-streaming with Mono for the first time. It was the first time. There's berries.
Don't forget, desert.
Oh, yeah, I'm coming. It's now open. Do we need to bring anything?
No.
Okay.
Oh, I gotta buy a ticket. Buy a ticket.
Do we need a lot of space in our inventory?
Probably, but it's okay.
Yeah. I'm just dropping off some things and then I'm coming.
A lot of things are too expensive anyway.
Okay. Put the stick in here. Stick. Whoa, get a room.
Let's see.
It was from Menace. Oh,
I want to hit him.
Yeah, I don't read those. It probably said it was for the medical center or something.
Oh, it's new.
Is this where you buy a ticket? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go. People in the bus. I got in the bus and they just left the rest. That's so mean. Always save some space. I mean, it does look like we have the same color shades. That's true. Our colors are the same, our stream rooms.
Excellent. Now for the first question. What is the date of the season's end? 28. Question 2. When does apricot tree bear fruit?
I've never been here.
I don't know. Wrong.
In Envy?
Dang it.
What do you mean, Tim? I heard you got a new kitchen.
Apricot fruit must be like fall or spring? I don't know. Hi, Six. Welcome.
Periodic table. No, I can't buy stuff from you. Pam is just selling her beer and whatnot. If you smell something good, it's the coconut oil I rubbed all over my skin. So says Haley.
Yeah, you gotta do the Haley thing. Or the Emily thing.
Saves in inventory, yeah.
Seems your fashion doesn't quite match your inner feelings. Just step up to the box. So, okay, you gotta go in the box with Emily.
Oh, okay. Mono and me are going into the same box. Before you
and letting Emily dress
visualize your arm to see what kind of style will make you happiest. Beepity boppity boop. Yes, I see. Why is she shaking her butt? Okay, I got it.
Don't be
I'm coming in. Oh, we're gonna be 3 in a box. Wait, is she joining us too? Who is that? Oh, look, a cauliflower fritter? What? Yikes, sorry if that hurt. This is wild.
She took my clothes off. Oh no.
Your inner self and outer self are now in perfect alignment.
Oh, I love it. I'm Link.
Oh, that's so cute. I'm a farmer. Still a farmer.
Link, I love it. I don't know if I want to come back and let her dress me again. No, your clothes are in your inventory. I love this outfit. It goes good with the purple hair. Your shoes match fine.
I don't. Yours are very cute. I'm just wearing a farmer outfit.
you look like the mayor. Is that what he wears?
Yep.
Mayor Momo.
Come on, fix me up. No.
You gotta wait till
tomorrow.
Want to
do it again.
She'll do it again every day. So do it 3 days in a row to get 3 different outfits from her.
Taking off the hat. Oh, there's a mysterious person here. Suspicious guy. Psst, hey kid, you've been watching these races? Pretty exciting, huh? Say, I got a little proposition for you. Just pick a racer in their next race. Will be a real stinker. Catch my drift? 1 calico egg for the price to pay the edge. I don't have a calico egg. I think we need to do contests first, right?
I don't remember.
Check out my cactus.
Okay, free cactus. Come get the cactus. You gotta come down here.
Okay.
Do the cactus thing.
Wait, gotta talk to Sebastian. Oh yes, looks like someone who would appreciate what I'm offering. Yes. It's so funny.
That's your new cactus girlfriend or boyfriend. There you go. You get to put him in your house.
You. So how's the little guy doing? Oh no.
We got different ones too.
Really?
I wonder if you get a new cactus each day.
This is mine. Which is yours? Show me yours. I'll show you mine.
I don't know if you can see it real good, but yours has a face that's different than mine. We both have the blue hair.
Mine has a big old nose.
Yeah.
I don't see. So, are you holding him? No.
Oh, well. Is that how I do it? There you go. Yeah. Mine's just got a little tiny face. Yours has got the interesting face. We need to take her.
Yours doesn't have a... Oh, it does have a face.
Just a little tiny face,
That's
yeah.
very loud, that sound effect. Holy shit.
I was like, did your cactus scare you that bad?
No, Timmy redeemed a drink sound effect. I don't know that one. So it scared the Jesus out of me. Sorry. The toe feels milky, but with plenty of body. Still a bit mellower than back home. Oh, pardon me, I've become so much of a sand connoisseur. Ugh. Wait, weren't you romancing Elliot?
I was, and I quit because I did it in the other game.
Okay, King Sting just won. Oh, the dark piano looks so cool. And you just need 1,000 coal?
Don't run. Don't run from yourself.
No. Yes, don't run. Oh yeah, Michigan, kiss yourself.
Isn't this where you buy flamingos too? Now that I see a flamingo.
I guess this is a different one, Timmy. The drink one.
The flamingo, then. What?
There's rhubarb
just
seeds,
hanging out with this bird. She seems to like me. Sebastian is flirting with a flamingo.
Oh no. Sebastian?
He's gonna trade you in for a flamingo.
Don't you dare. Care for a test of knowledge. Yes. For the first question.
Oh, sorry, I looked in there.
Oh,
there's nothing I want to buy.
That's twin. What does the apricot tree fruit? When does it bear?
Not summer.
Fruit? The apricot?
I did summer.
Not
it was
summer.
Wrong.
So it's gonna be fall. It's usually in fall for fruit trees. Oh, it isn't. It's spring.
We both got it wrong.
What? Well, we at least know it's spring now.
Mm-hmm.
Shrouded figure. I can send you home. No.
Yeah, that's your shortcut, huh?
Oh, every day we'll have a pair of challenges for you. Choose from one, complete one, and Guild will reward you with calico eggs. Ah.
Rare fruit, extremely sharp cheddar, shrimp, cave loaf.
So Mono.
He gives you food.
Which one? This was funny drink. I think, Timmy, the commands that are there for Mono are sub commands, so you need to be subbed enabled in order to use them, right, Mono?
Only the sound ones. Those everybody can use. He just pulled up. Everybody
the
can use
kiss
those.
didn't work then. For Timmy, the kiss didn't work.
Oh, is he in my chat or yours though?
In mine, but it should work because it works for me.
You would think.
No, it doesn't.
But
it doesn't. Oh, that's sad.
Yeah, I'm guessing you had to be in my stream to make it work.
Yeah. So Mono, we can choose challenges: Monster Hunt or Deep Dive. It's probably Monster Hunt is easier. It's 10 mummies, or the Deep Dive is 30 levels of the Skull Cavern.
Oh god. Yeah. You pick.
And we need to do it in one day.
But we don't have time today already, but we could try. But if we pass out in these caves...
Oh shit. Yeah, and I didn't even talk to everyone yet. Never mind. Oh, he wants us to catch 3 fish.
Which I'm terrible at.
Oh yeah, I didn't talk to him either yet. Have you seen the size of the calico eggs? What is he doing with his hands? He's weird. Well, there. Are you hungry? Yes.
He makes you food.
Yes. I want rare fruit.
Don't leave.
Don't
leave.
Rich marinara. I'm getting.
They're all leaving because it's 1 o'clock.
Oh no, I'm coming. Wait, does it leave? Does the bus leave?
I don't know. I'm taking the bus, but I don't know if it'll put me back
I'm
fast enough.
coming. I can.
You can always
yeah,
use
not
that other
everyone is
person too.
Not everyone is gone yet, so we're good. I'm in the bus. I'm in the bus. I'm made.
You got 20 seconds to get in bed.
20?
Mm-hmm. 10.
No. What? It was still 10 to 1 when I left. Oh, fuck.
Put on the meter? Oh, please do if you're
I'm
full.
costing all the money. Rain's gonna be so mad.
You just gotta start selling some jelly.
Oh, yeah. That's 3 nights in a row I didn't make. One was Sebastian's fault, though.
Mm-hmm. So you have till noon till the desert festival opens.
Oh, okay.
Don't forget to drop off clothes and your dresser and all that kind of stuff, and make room in your inventory. Drop off your boyfriend cactus.
Oh, thanks. Yeah. Another 1,000 gold. You're gonna put on the heater. Smart. Smart. Okay.
I was hitting shift. I wasn't.
I'm gonna put on my normal clothes again. I didn't like the farmer outfit they gave me.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally farmer pants and majoral suspenders. So yes, Mono, they gave me the. That was
Laughing.
So mean. So mean.
Terrible. Give me the mayor's outfit. You put your boyfriend outside?
Yes. Did they call it your boyfriend? Or
I think they're like
is that what the guy
partner
said?
or something. I don't remember how I got that impression. But one stream I got that impression.
Oh, beans done. Stop trying to eat the green beans. Just pick them.
No, stop eating the mushrooms.
Oh, Michigan ships Mono.
Oh my.
Wait, quotes? I don't see the quotes.
Was it? Michigan's now a cat. Michigan cat.
Meow, 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 meow.
Meow. I should make some truffle oil. I wish I had time to actually shear the animals, but I don't. I don't have time to shear you and milk you and all that stuff, but I did love on you. So I hope that counts for something.
It does. It does. Okay, and silver. And then the beans.
They're just gonna feel rather uncomfortable for a while.
Where did we put the wood again? Was it here? Or we just don't have any wood?
It's like those farms that have it built in where the cows go in to milk themselves because they start feeling so uncomfortable. They just walk into the milking stations and basically hook themselves up. They're like, oh, help me.
Oh, drain me.
Yep.
Poor thing.
Weird.
What did we need a truffle for the community center, right?
Yes. I have one, I just never drop it off. Terrible.
I have a gold one, so if you have a less than gold one...
Yeah.
Or is it gold as well?
You can do whatever. And then, they keep making them, so I've been making truffle oil too.
Oh, nice. Well, the gold one, it's a waste to give the gold one to the community center, in my opinion, but... So if you have a lesser one than that, you can switch it out if you like.
I think I do. I think I have just a regular in my pocket. I got a couple of them because I just picked up a bunch of them.
Ooh.
I think, yeah.
Oink,
Well, no,
oink.
I have a silver in my pocket.
I mean, silver is worse than gold, so that's
Oh,
good.
I have 3 plain and a silver. But yeah. No, that.
It's time to go
Just
to
want to shut the gate.
the desert.
Just want to shut the gate.
How much coal do we have?
We got plenty.
Oh, we don't have 999 coal, sadly.
No. We do not.
No. There's salmon berries everywhere, so we might have to pick them up soon as well.
Okay.
Let's go to the desert.
Alright, I dropped a bunch of things off so we can make some money since we keep passing out. Oh, my leg keeps falling asleep.
Sorry.
How are you,
Are you
sorry?
positioning one leg under the other?
Yes, I keep sitting on it.
Yeah, I do the same. It sucks. Sit straight. Someone do a posture check for Mono.
Yeah. I need posture check.
Needs her balls. No.
No, I need to stand up. Yeah.
I mean, you could do a little break next time. Next sleep. How's you, Michigan?
Alright, Emily, what ridiculous outfit are you gonna give me today?
I'm in the forest. Are you not in the desert yet?
I'm talking to Emily.
Oh, okay.
What do you mean? How is she in a booth and not at the clothes station?
Uh-huh.
Can I just go in and do it myself? Yeah, I think I can. That's my cute. Oh, I can. The other girl can dress me, I guess. Oh, Sandy's gonna dress me.
Nice. Is that Sandy? Because I don't know her name yet.
Sandy, yeah.
I just...
She's the desert chick.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I probably can't even catch scorpion fish. Rain probably can.
Oh, I got a green dress this time. It's a slime dress. Oh my god.
Oh, that's so cute.
Look at my boobs. Sorry, just said that.
Oh, the front. Yeah, it looks like. Oh my.
The slime dress. Don't be naughty. You're just.
It looks like droopy boobies.
Oh god.
Oh
no. Yep, I have an interesting dress on now. Thanks.
Let's see what I have.
Yeah,
Why am I not coming out?
Okay, you gotta walk
Where am
out
I?
yourself. You gotta walk out.
I have the same.
Look at you, man.
Jiggle the boobies, jiggle.
No, we just need jiggle physics installed on this game, right?
Well, it's so weird because the nipples are like the same color as the hands. So if you do this, it looks like the boobs are going side to side. You're wild as fuck on the stream. Yeah, it happens when Mono and I get together.
Race is in progress. When does the race not in progress so I can bet or whatever I'm supposed to do? I don't know.
Let's see who wins this time, though.
Do we want to go do the cave thing while we have time?
Yeah. It looks like the scorpion is winning again. Finish.
Oh, they
What's his
just
name?
finished.
Oh! Thank you! Thanks for the follow, Rando. Who won? Race winner is... Again, Kingston. So I'm guessing Kingston wins every time. Can we not bet on... Can we not bet?
I'm gonna bet Shoe Biscuit.
I'm going Kingston. Now sit back. No, I'm not gonna sit back.
No, we're gonna go do stuff. I don't know. We're gonna go. Oh, we get free food too. I forgot about that. Oh, I'll do that later.
Oh, right. Now it's 12 Omni Geos or again level 30.
Okay.
Which one do you want to do?
I don't know.
I think 12 Omni Geodes is pretty hard to find, right? What?
I won't allow held message for using block terms. Oh, how do I allow? You should be able to allow it.
Wait,
You
what?
should be able to allow it. He tried to add a quote.
Oh, wait. Oh, no. Are you blocked? Wait, let me go to
No, the
settings.
quote was blocked, but I thought he could turn it around and
I thought I gave you mod up.
No, it's in my stream. He was trying to add a quote in my stream, and it says, quote KimonoKat, look at my...
But not show guests.
Yeah.
Oh.
I don't know how to turn it on.
Okay. Sorry. I'm doing it random. I'm having fun.
Shane, if you can figure out how
you like my
fix it.
I just redid it again. Wait, Moto, we're gonna run out of time again. So are we gonna do the Omni Geodes or the level 30?
Geodes, let's go.
I hope we can find them. If you could keep a Pokemon as pet, which one would it be? I don't know much about Pokemon, to be honest. It's not. I didn't read that. I don't know what the Calico does.
Get in here.
I'm coming. I've never been in here. Where do I go? Oh, there.
Anywhere. We're just looking for thingamajigs.
Watch out! You're getting attacked! I'm getting attacked! What is this? A little dragon?
Yeah,
but I would... What would I like as a pet? Let's see.
Yeah, I guess you need to come in here with like bombs to actually...
I have one with me. I have a bomb with me.
Okay, well don't set it off on me. You find a spot like up there.
What, on your hair? How big is the range of this one?
Oh, I gotta switch my weapon. Oh. What is happening? Did I die?
Oh, I think
Items
you did.
lost. What the heck? But my health bar was still up, I thought. Oh, maybe not.
Oh, you were getting attacked. What do I do? What do I do? Can I save you?
Place your bomb. No, I'm at medical bay.
Oh no. I think one of those worm thingies attacked you, and I was placing the bomb.
I was too busy worried about getting blown up, and I got attacked.
Oh, and their attacks are heavy as well. I'm nearly dead too. Oh. Oh, and he gave me another bomb? Eating Mono's cheese that she gave me.
I don't think I can be at the same level as you either now. These caves. Really? Not unless you're still on the first floor.
I am still on the first floor. Because there's many chests here and I wanted to open them.
Yeah.
There's a huge purple slime here though.
Did you blow him up?
Nope. Now I did. Oh. Oh, there's tiny ones now?
Yeah.
Look at our slime dresses.
Battling slimes and slime.
Oh, watch out! Behind you!
You hit the wrong button. Get away from us!
Get away, you fiend! You killed my friend! Get away!
I hate it. Go away, dude.
We got him. And we're getting sleeping again. Well, level 30 is out.
Damn. Yeah. We
can just go down and go up again. Yeah. Oh, watch out! Leave the mine!
I did.
Oh. Yeah, I did too.
By the way, Twitter account, so I could follow you. By the way, what's your...
Let me check.
Think for Momo. Yeah.
There you go.
I'm gonna...
You got both votes.
I'm gonna teleport out.
Oh shit.
Oh, I need to ask this guy questions.
Time crunch.
Yes, what's the questions? Questions are, what is the date of the season's end? 28th. Okay.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
And apricot was fall?
I'm gonna fall asleep again.
Correct.
Spring.
How many steps have you taken? Oh God, I don't know how many steps I've taken. All right. What's George's last name? Miller?
Miller. Wrong. Don't do Miller. Okay,
try again
let's warp. I mean, it's less than 500 to warp home, so or 1,000. I mean, it's less than 1,000. Ah, we're getting stuck behind things.
Time to get our slime butts in bed because we got 10 seconds.
I mean, it's okay for home, right?
It helps.
Okay. You still get a penalty?
Yeah, you can lose some money.
Okay, I need to read. Okay, if you could keep a cat and a pet. I'm on phone, I can't fix it. Right. Straight from a horror movie. Your favorite Pokemon is Absol. What kind of Pokemon is that?
It's a white dog-looking Pokemon with like a blue knife on its head.
I love like doggos.
Blue knife-looking shaped scythe on its head, I guess you would say.
A scythe? Damn, exciting.
It's not really a scythe. It's just trying to compare the shape to tell you what it is. It's like a navy-looking scythe shape.
I want to Google it now.
Sticking out of its head.
Absol. Oh, yeah. That's a dangerous pet to keep. I don't know enough. Which one would you choose, Mono?
What?
If you could choose a Pokemon
Absol?
to live with.
Oh, to live with.
Oh, not Absol. You.
Maybe Espeon.
I think
the psychic
I
one.
would still no. I think I would go for Eevee.
Yeah. That or Skitty. I love Skitty so much. Skitty's a cat, so.
Isn't Eevee the one with the
little chest? She's got all the evolutions, yeah, the chest fluff and tail fluff.
Oh, that or a Mimikyu.
Mimikyu, the one that kills you if you ever looked under its drape.
I didn't know about that. He just looks cute.
Its form is supposedly so horrible that you like die if you look at him or something like. So there's like theories that it's like Medusa kind of situation that.
Oh damn!
So it covers
Medusa
itself
was strict though,
because it wants to be strict. Wants to be loved, so it tries to dress like Pikachu. Is why it looks like a Pikachu.
Okay, I still keep him. I still keep him as
because he wants to be loved so bad. He doesn't want to be evil. It's just.
I love him.
People are fearful of him. I forget all the theories. Shane's probably got a better breakdown of it.
Absol with the nickname Minerva and every Pokemon. Like Minerva from Harry Potter. What's my favorite animal? Well, dogs. No, well, red pandas. It's too many types of animals, honestly.
Yeah.
Monos is kitties, yeah. I like red pandas. I like sloths. I like Arctic foxes. Thanks for the follow, Onyx. Timmy would go for Eevee too. Nice.
Yeah, trying to score back.
So you would go for Meowth, Mono, or is there another cat?
No, not Meowth. I would go with Skitty, of course.
Skitty?
Skitty's my cat Pokemon. Yeah, Houndour would be a cool one for you, Momo.
Creepy?
Houndour would be a cool one for you.
Really? Let me check.
Yes. It's very dark and has horns.
Ooh.
Just like you. He's a doggo.
I mean, yeah, but no.
He's a doggo.
Maybe that's shark dog. What the hell? Is that an evolution?
Slackoff is a sloth. Zigzagoon looks kind of like a red panda. Zigzagoon is cool looking, especially if you get the black and white version. That's what my lick emotes.
Zigzagoon.
Zigzagoon.
Nah, I don't like these.
Yeah, the brown one is okay, but the black and white one's cute.
I would still go for Mimikyu.
Mimikyu needs all the love. You just gotta look up all the history of Mimikyu. Yeah.
I'll give them love. They'll be my creepy little pet.
But yeah. You want to take a stretch break, Mama?
Oh, right. You wanted to, right?
I do.
Yeah,
I do. You don't have to. Okay.
I could do. I'll wait for you, and then I'll quickly go to the toilet after you.
Okay,
So we'll
we can
keep
take turns.
people entertained.
Okay. There you go.
We can do that now. While we're looking up Pokemon, my favorite starter superior. Oh, it's superior. Superior. Let's see. Oh. Let's see what that does. I don't know what this does on stream. Give me a second. Wait, that means I'm just gone? Oh, Hi. All the things. We're still waiting for Mono. She's having a little break. Superior. Let's look him up. Superior. Oh, that's a pretty Snuckle. Yeah, that I wouldn't mind having that as a pet either. That's a pretty one. I wanna look up more Pokemon. Cute Pokemon. Oh, Shaman is so cute too. It's like a little hedgehog bush. And Togepi is cute. And Pichu, there's so many cute ones. Oh, Thumpy. The little elephant. And Pancham. Aww. And Joltik is cute too. He's a little spoody. I got one. Shuckle. You got one what? Oh, you called her Jade? Yeah, that fits. Because she's like light green. Oh, and I also like Vulpix. Vulpix is cute. Azuriel. Minkino. Minkino is so cute too. It's a mink or a chinchilla. Oh. There's too many cute ones. It's hard to pick. A Sphere.
All the cute Pokemons.
Yeah, I'm just looking at a cute one. Like, I want this one. I want that one. No, I want this one. Oh, try Shuckle. Shuckle.
See, this is my problem. There's 7 servings in this bag, and I'm gonna eat the whole bag.
What is it?
Those lemon wafers.
Oh, those, yeah. Okay, I'll be right back. I'll take a quick toilet break. Be right back.
Almost done. They can see you. They got her. Oh, hi. Hello there. Jack. Shane. Yeah. Those two are the ones that people choose to make spicy Pokemon out of. I'm cold. Maybe that's why I keep sitting on my feet. For different reasons. That face does it all. I keep like putting my feet in my chair and sitting on them, and I'm like, part of it's because it's cold in here, and I'm cold. A lot of times I have like a blanket on my chair, but it's like in the wash right now, so I don't have my blanket. Because then I'll like put it on my lap because it's chilly today. It's abnormally chilly, and it's supposed to get abnormally cold. I forgot here.
About that.
I forgot what?
I thought you said, we see you.
Oh, yeah, I did. Yeah.
Because I forgot that it's only on my stream that I'm doing the
we see you. Yes. Yeah.
You can see all the mess right there, right?
We can see your whole background. I mean, but yeah.
Oops.
I'm just glad you have pants on, you know?
I never stream it. I'm just wearing the sweatpants.
At least the pants, right?
Of course. It's winter
Do you
here.
own a heavy jacket?
You know.
I do have a heavy jacket, but I don't think I've wore it yet. And I've had it for over a year.
It's honestly, I could hear you say, "We see you," like from my headset. It was sitting on my desk. I was like, "Oh fuck." Oh well.
Oh, an unknown. If you have an Ultra Ball, use it.
Ooh. Wait, so
But
wait, but the PokeCatch has been working. Is it because we're streaming together? I guess.
oh
so.
yeah, it works. It's just Ultra Ball's like one of your best balls you can use.
I can't do this. I can't do the kiss. See?
Yeah, but you've got the community bot in your channel, right?
No.
Oh, okay. I guess because it's a
Twitch wide thing.
A Twitch wide thing, yeah. No, I'm not wearing shorts. I'm wearing these stretchy pants.
Same.
I'm wearing these stretchy pants, but I'm so
We
cold.
got him!
Yeah!
We got him. What is it?
Unknown is usually like a letter. It's like a mythical Pokemon.
Unknown.
Unknown, yeah. Yeah, if you can look at your own channel, like at the bottom underneath in your extensions or my channel, since it's if you don't have the bot in my channel under the extensions, and then you can go look at the your bag or the PC, I mean, and see which Pokemon you have, and the first one that pops up will probably be the unknown, so you can see it. Like I just caught unknown, and it looks like the letter A.
Bag. Why can't I click the bag? I can click shop.
Oh, not the bag, but the PC. Click the PC.
Oh, the PC, yeah.
And does the unknown pop up as the first Pokemon?
Yeah, unknown. It's like a little compass magnet-y thingy.
Yeah, but the black parts usually form like a letter of the alphabet.
Oh, it's an A?
It depends on which letter you got. Yeah, I'm guessing you caught the E. I'm guessing we both went after the letter A because it goes through A to Z, like the whole alphabet. There's one in the shape of every letter.
That's funny. Well, we got the A.
Yeah.
So you turned the heat up, Sterko, just to be wearing shorts.
Oh, is that what I missed?
That Sterko was wearing the shorts. They're both the letter S. That's bad. No.
I got letter A. We're good.
We're AA. No booze, Mono. No more wine for you.
Today.
You were having one in Stardew earlier. She went straight after wine. You all saw it.
That's right. You're right.
No, she's fine. She can have her wine. What temp is that in Celsius? Because I and we'll say them both because then everyone will understand. Tell us both. Shall we continue to Stardew?
I'm glad you have fun friends I can talk to. Yeah, Momo's awesome. Momo's awesome. Yeah, I guess we should continue.
I'm from the Netherlands, by the way. That's why I don't do Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
All right.
Are you from America too, Rando? America.
just gotta figure out why I'm blurry on Twitch.
You're from the US. I don't get why you're blurry. Wait, do we try Googling?
No, but we can do it another day.
Yeah, we might want to try Googling blurry when in. Oh, sorry, stream together. Maybe
Yeah.
that's some whole new thing. 19 Celsius. That's a good temp for your home. Yeah. Usually people here have it on 20, 21. But I'm guessing you're not in a very warm area, or are you in a warm area? You don't have to say where, Sterko. I'm just
So
wondering.
what is 68? What temperature did he say it keeps us at?
19 Celsius, but no, I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit.
I don't either. What's that in Fahrenheit? You're kidding. My house is currently 68.
Yeah.
Fahrenheit.
Not 69. This honor on your cow, this honor on your family.
I decided it was too warm for that. 66. Dang.
So right now outside here, oh, it's not too bad actually. What? Temperature went up. 11 degrees Celsius outside. We might have snow next week. Finally. I want snow, but it's just been raining. So 11 Celsius would be. Oh shit! I closed all my apps. Shit. To Fahrenheit.
Yeah, mine's like 20.
That's what I. 51.8
Celsius is my house. Yeah.
Oh, nice. So outside here, it's 51.8. Yeah. And the inside of my house is 64.
Wiggles. Oh my gosh.
Oh, thank you, Timmy.
66 to
You had
67.
snow
Is that where your computer room is, or your whole house? Because I know you said it's colder where your computer room is.
My state has a broad range of temps, but it gets really hot in summer and really cold. Ooh. We had a little bit of snow like in the middle of the night, but it was like snow and rain. Get your kicks.
But Wiggles gave Fahrenheit, if that's what you're asking right now. Where did Momo go? Did Momo hit a button? Where did Momo go?
Wet snow?
Oh
no? Did you close the window?
No. I'm like, where Momo? Your camera's off and everything.
No, yeah, I was looking at it and it just poof. It went bye-bye.
I don't know, but you gotta turn on your camera sharing again. So I don't know what happened.
Yes, you as well?
Oh, me too?
Yeah, it just totally reset. I just started to share chat again, so we're good again.
Are they trying to tell us we're not allowed to
stream that long?
Yeah, or something. I don't know.
Maybe it's topped at 2 hours.
Camera.
It should just be in your lower bottom, like when you're doing a video call. There's just a big cross over it. Get out of the settings.
I don't know.
Get out of the settings. And just look all the way to the bottom. You see all the circles.
Oh, there it is. Yeah.
Screen.
Okay.
Yeah. There. Hi.
No, I don't know.
Hello, little mono.
It's just being wild.
It's like you guys aren't partners. You shouldn't be able to do this. No. Getting
and that's from Momo on her stream.
It's so funny now because I'm huge compared to you right now. Because I couldn't do the setup. Like with you
There.
on your stream, probably you're probably much bigger than me right now. So I don't know where
But
you
yeah,
are
I can
with
refresh
everything.
guys if you need to. Like it's 65 in my office. I was saying that 19 Celsius is about 66, 67. Oh, okay.
Played in the snow lots of times. Did you, Mono?
Never.
Never.
No.
I should
Sad
invite you over
story.
here when it snows one day.
I've never been in the snow at all, except for I've seen flurries once.
Flurries.
That's it. No snow for Mono. Ever.
No.
That's
Ever.
nope. I'm a Floridian.
No.
Is the life. I know it is. I will see snow one day, and I will make it a huge event and a huge deal.
One day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
12F or 10C outside right now. But oh, yeah. Negative 10C outside. Oh.
Negative.
There's rumors that
Nice.
Florida's going to make it to 12F in like a week.
Ooh.
I'm
I
scared.
guess we're having some strong winds coming. Yeah. Some cold and strong winds.
Let's see.
You want to go do the game again?
Mm-hmm.
Yay.
Yep. Because I'm not going to be on real late tonight.
Gotta get up early again tomorrow.
Yeah. I'll probably play a couple more days and then then be done for the night, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's 2 a.m. here, so.
It's strange how temps get as low as the 30s in my house. Home state, yeah. I remember playing in the snow and throwing snowballs with the children in the street. Sounds so cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mama, I think we're just waiting on you. Whenever you're ready to start.
It says it's waiting for you.
Waiting for other players, 2 of 2.
That's what it says for me, too.
Did we break it? I'm gonna have to repeat our day. I'm gonna be very upset.
It says I'm waiting on purple. You're purple haired.
Mine just says waiting on other players, 2 of 2. Day
Oh, no.
17 of 2.
Yeah. I think we broke another thing.
The shared stream thing is like a mess.
We're not going to bed yet. Almost.
What happens if I hit stop? Do we lose our whole day? I hope not.
Sleep well, Silent broke. I think no, because we already went.
Hi, Silent. Okay, so I'll stop it and restart it. And we'll see what happens.
I'll exit the game too, because I have to probably.
Confirm. Because we're breaking things and stuff. Going to break it all.
That heartbeat was scary to me. Good night, Silent Rogue. So bright. When you start Stardew, it's so white.
Mm-hmm.
2 different points of views. There's actually it's all coming together.
Can alternate and go back and forth? Yeah.
I think there's still the multi-link things where you can actually have them side by side.
Oh, we can have both streams up too.
Yep. I wonder how that will work with this. Let me see if I can still find it.
I have a rock over my head. I'm not wearing my slime dress anymore. We lost our slime dresses. Cry. We lost a whole day. We lost our slime dresses. Yes, I got the dang cactus in my inventory again. I gotta put it back down again.
Here, so I got you. This is the multi-stream. So if you click that, oh you're using mobile on your smartphone. Yeah, okay. So those on PC, if you click that link, you'll have to log in again probably, but that means you could watch both of us at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
You'll just have to put one of our audios really low, because or else you're gonna be hearing us twice.
I'm so sad.
Oh, we
I
lost
want my
the
slime
whole
dress.
day.
Yeah, so we gotta go do that again. We gotta get our slime dresses again. That means all that stuff we collected and threw away to sell.
Again.
I gotta do it again.
Hack.
I'm so sad.
Guys,
Slime dresses, yeah, that was yeah. There was a thing where we both had matching slime dresses given to us in the festival, the desert festival.
Maybe she gives them again.
I hope. I know it's random though, so chances are.
At least we have the footage of it.
Yes, we have footage. If anybody bothered to clip it, maybe I don't know. But we'll have it, regardless.
I mean, we could make a highlight of it.
Yeah, we could. Be funny.
Oh, we forgot the Pokemon. The slime dress looks very weird. Like you're.
Yeah, the slime dress
you're
looks
a
like
sagging
TMI.
Christmas tree.
Yeah. Slime dress gives you feminine features right on the chest. Mm-hmm.
Saggy ones.
We were dying laughing, put it that way.
Thank you for the hugs, Tim. Okay, Mono, take cheese with you for the mine. Put the clothes away.
Okay, I can't get out of the dang fence because the animals won't let me.
Oh no.
No, get away! Get back in your pen. He's like stuck in the gate. Can you get out? I don't know.
Desert Festival's now open.
Okay.
Why was I so much slower today? Making our way downtown.
I don't know. Me too, because I feel like... Oh, did it like not open till noon before?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on.
I'm just dropping. Did you bring enough cheese?
I have 17 cheese.
You take all your cheese with you? Jesus.
I don't know. Jesus. Oh my gosh, Mama.
I had to, I'm sorry. Oh, and the bombs! We need bombs!
We don't have any bombs unless we make some real quick. Let me look. I can make little cherry ones.
Yeah, sure.
I made 6.
17 wheels of cheese? No, lumps of cheese.
I made 6 little cherry bombs. That's it. That's all we get. That's not gonna get us very far, but...
I don't have more in my chest either. Okay, well.
Let me look in my chest. No, none in there. Ouch. I bet Rain has 500 in her house.
Oh, baby. We
Yeah.
could check. We could quickly check. I sent some pictures of more Pokemon in the Poke Games chat. Oh, thank you, Circo.
Rain, I'm going to go steal from your house. Where's her house at? Or is that her house right there that I just walked past? Probably. Or is that your house? That's your house. Isn't it?
Rain's house on top.
This one? No.
I guess it didn't work.
I don't know. That's Momo's house.
Didn't hear Mono jump.
No.
It should have worked. Did you hear it though?
No, didn't hear it. Is it not working?
You're special.
Oh god.
I'll just do it like that. I'll just do it manually, because I can.
Nothing's working. Yeah. Alright, I'm just leaving. Let's go. Let's run. Gonna wait.
I forgot I can do that now that we're streaming together.
I could find Rain's house.
Mono, we do get another chance to the quiz.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, let's make a hearty beans. with
Let's go see if we get slime dresses.
Oh, yes.
I'm gonna cry if I don't.
I'm coming.
Come on, Mama.
Skull Cave casserole. Mona, you should make that too later. Might be good.
Ooh.
Wait, it's
Did
not
you get
doing
skull?
anything.
I gotta go back and get the food now too.
But I ate it, so it doesn't do anything. There we go. Can we just skip? I'm gonna skip.
Oops, that's my cue.
Oh.
See what we get.
Thank you, Rando. Yes! Got the slime dress again.
Did you?
Yes! With the jiggle titties. Yeah! Look at us with the jiggle jiggies! Woo!
We both got the slime dress as a kid.
Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle.
Oh my god.
Jiggle, jiggle, jiggle. It's called the slime dress, and we just...
There's green slimes in the caves that look exactly like this dress, basically.
What happens if you take it off? Wait. Oh, it's a slime shirt and a slime dress. Yeah, so...
Yippee! Yeah, see, it's a shirt with eyeballs, 2 eyes. I mean, it could be a Junimo dress. I don't know. No, it says slime. Yeah.
Okay, so what is George's last name? It's not Miller. What did you pick?
I picked Miller. We both picked the same thing.
Oh, I did too. Does anyone know if it's Oh, wait, you can check. No, you can't.
Oh, I probably can.
Can you still check?
Hold on. No, it only gives first names.
Oh. Okay, I'll do Molnar. It's Molnar!
Okay. Which is... which
I got
one?
the Molnar with the U.
Okay.
50 calico eggs.
First question, 28. Spring, right?
We did the thing. Yeah.
Oh, how many steps I've taken? Oh crap, I think that was the middle one. And then Molinar is the first one?
Yep. Boop, boop.
Yay! We have eggs. We can buy stuff.
Okay, the challenge. Do we go for the Omni Geodes again?
You want to?
Or the level 30 Skull Cavern. They're both hard.
Yeah, because you have to kill so many creatures to get to level 30.
I'll just do this Geodes, we'll see.
Beans and cherry syrup. Gross.
Oh, you have to do the beans and
sweet bean cake is what I made.
It doesn't help though, like you eat it right off the bat, so it doesn't really do anything.
No, if you were coming straight out of the thing, then it'd be helpful.
Oh,
Merry late Christmas, Happy New Year. You too, man.
Happy New Year, Happy New Year. Here we go again.
Which one did you pick? Find the things and stuff for level 30.
Geodes are in everything, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Oh, I found the ladder.
Okay, we probably should go down then.
Really? Wait, there's a question mark kitty here.
Oh, I found one Omni Geo.
Nice. What is the question mark kitty?
I found an egg.
Mono.
Another egg.
Mono.
Oh, he's gonna kill me! He gave me eggs.
Mono, what is the question mark kitty? What is it?
Oh, you get to take it home with you. I think.
Oh, lose more eggs when you're knocked out? More?
Ah,
oh no,
so
my god, we're dying! We're dying! I need
Mama,
food!
what do we do?
I know! Yes, eat the cheese! Don't ask me that, just eat it! good that I activated the thing, because I'm not dead. I'm still fighting.
I died.
Oh no.
I left you.
All alone. Oh shit, I need cheese again. Eat cheeses.
I died. I did get some. Oh yeah, we were supposed to use bombs. I forgot about that.
Oh, I have the one bomb again, but I doubt
At least I won't blow you up.
wait, I didn't blow you up. You died of your own accord, little matey.
I said at least I won't blow you up because you're nowhere near me.
Oh, you won't blow me up.
Yeah. Yeah?
I thought you said at least you won't blow me up. I thought you said that.
Pretty much.
Oh, I found an Omnigeo too.
No, stop touching me. Stop touching me.
No,
Don't
touch me.
No touchy, no touchy. I don't want to die.
I'm still level 1, by the way. It's good that I activated the kitty. Damn. Because I think that gave you like... Oh no. Oh fuck me, I'm getting out of here. No. Get away from me. Mono, run! It started to get dark. Wait, what happened? Did you run?
I was on a different level.
Are you still in there?
Yeah, I'm still in here. I'm on a different level.
Oh no, that's level 1. There's like 5 of those things.
See?
Did you just ran for the ladder? Oh, you did. You did. Okay, I'll come. Now I'm level 2. Are you level 3 already?
Yeah.
Okay. There you are.
Level 3.
Whew. That scared me. There were suddenly like 5 of those things. I'm like, I'm out.
Thanks for the alert.
I need to put this cheese in a different area so that I can eat it faster, because that was way too tricky.
Because the next one is not a good time.
Slimes.
Just saying.
This one, the slimes.
Why is
watch out! Watch out!
I can't get away.
No, fuck me.
My game's locking me up.
I'll protect you. I killed it.
There. Like dumb thing.
Working? Oh,
yeah, it helped me.
Scared me.
Oh crap! I left the mine.
And now you can get back here. What's happening?
And there was like 20 million of them. I felt like.
Oh jeez.
I'm just having a rough time. Just starting over here.
Yeah, you just have to run for the first ladder. You have to run for the first ladder on your right. Then you're good.
God,
That's what I did.
So many!
Because it's the night thingy. The nighttime, whatever.
Oh, God. There were so many of them in there. And just like...
Yep.
That, I'm dead. I'm like...
Oh, there's another one coming. I hate it that you're inanimate when you're... Oh, it's nighttime. We have to go. Okay, we have to take the fast route.
Yeah, because I'm like walking slow as a snail too.
Oh no. Do you have the thing? I
got coffee. Oh, come on! I gotta at least get out of this mine.
I believe, Mono.
It worked, huh?
Oh, wait.
Go. At least to the bus stop.
I'm gonna go in the first bed I see.
Come on, go faster, little legs. At least I'm outside.
You can run, run.
Outside the cabin. They will not take my eggs.
Oh, you with your heartbeat to me. Stop it.
Oh. I don't know. I feel stressed. Oh, we forgot to talk to the cactus person again. Dang it. Okay, don't forget to put extra clothes away.
Yes.
Oh, wrong thing. They don't go here. They go in the dresser.
There's a lot of pickled things ready, though. So we can sell those. Honk! Mono, there's wine.
Why?
Did I pick up?
Need a cot up here.
Yeah, okay,
catch.
so the cave is not a good idea for us to.
Yeah, we're not equipped enough for that yet. We're not high
I bet
enough levels.
Rain has the weapon for it.
As a cheat code.
I have one Omni Geode. We have cheat codes.
No,
She's like, no, we're gonna do super vanilla today. Oh,
yeah.
catch. Thanks, Shabroman. I hope you have a good night too. Honk. Oh no! Cows! Come back! Whoa, they're escaping!
The animals out.
A couple
Who let
of
the
them.
cows out? Momo.
Moo. Moo, moo, moo.
Who let the cows out?
They were heading out so freaking fast too.
Right, I'm gonna go see what I could buy with like 30 eggs when this thing opens.
Damn you, cows.
Hi there, fam. Good evening and good night. I am here for you. Just got into bed, sleep, as I am tired a lot and I have to work in the morning. Have a great stream and much love. Night.
Sleep
Thank you for
well.
liking and listening.
Okay, I have to.
It's Momo.
What?
Train is
A
passing.
twain.
I don't need
A
no thing and
twain.
train.
Oh, I didn't put new things
We
in
both caught the Pokemon.
I didn't put new things in the thing. Yes.
We both caught the Pokemon. Time to go see what the mysterious outfit of the day is. We'll see what we can buy.
Mono's so ready. Mona's so ready for another like slime dress or whatnot.
Oh, hi. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Please return when the attendee is present. Oh, can't. Oh, and now it's
Wait,
present.
It opens at earlier today.
Yeah, 10. What? I don't understand. It said it was open, but now it's not open. I'm so confused. Yeah. I have to wait till somebody shows up or something.
I'm coming. Maybe that's it. Maybe we both need to be there.
Yeah, I'm waiting on you.
I'm here. Oh,
Maybe it allows us to come here at 10, but we can't do anything till noon, I guess. I don't know.
Maybe. We still have to bet on the... Oh, the rooster is winning now.
Mm-hmm. Progress.
Come on, hurry up, little man.
Right? Yes. Speed Rooster.
That wasn't there the last time, was it?
No. Do we actually have to watch?
I hope not. It says sit back, but we can go, I think, for our costumes.
Change our clothes.
Oh. I'm just gonna skip the whole scene again. Because the race is about to start. On your marks,
oh
get
my
set,
gosh!
Go. What the F is that?
Get a rainbow shirt and beanie.
What the hell? I'm a babushka!
Is it a mushroom?
It's like a scarf thing.
But it looks like a mushroom. And I get a rainbow beanie.
It's a spotted head scarf. I'm a babushka. I'm a granny.
Is that what it says when you click
I'm a granny and you're
propeller
See,
hat,
I want
gesture shirt
Stop.
and farmer
Stop.
pants?
You can't win. Stop. 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 We did, or did I go for you? No, I think I did the rooster too.
I did a rooster. Finished. Dang it. Nola.
Dang it.
Oh, I gotta see what I can buy with these eggs. I got 30 eggs. How many eggs you got? Probably more than me because you didn't lose them.
52.
I can buy 30 things of cloth. No, that sucks. I can buy a wallpaper. That's boring. I can buy...
Fair.
Oh, look around. Look over here. I can buy nothing because those take different things. I can buy.
Oh, don't forget the cactus guy.
Oh yeah. Oh, I can buy 10 mystery box for.
Ooh.
20 or something. Do the mystery box.
Come on, crab. Come on,
and
crab.
And then that leaves me with just a couple little...
Yes, Krabby! Krabby taking the lead. Come on, Krabby. I'm gonna win! I'm gonna win!
That's cool.
Let's go! Come on, Crab. Don't. Go on.
Yay! What do you win?
I don't know. It's a trap.
What have you been waiting for? Oh, mysterious cloud is over us.
Cactus crawler, come here to collect your prize. What is it? Oh, 20 eggs.
Oh, that's cool.
So now go for the chicken again. Go for the chicken. Go for the chicken because I think they win the. Yeah, I think they win separately. Yeah, I'll go King Sting. So if that wins, I'll give you mine.
Let's look for a free cactus.
Yes.
Oh, asked me about my cactus. Never mind.
Oh, it's just one.
Shane's not here. I can't get to the flamingo. Greedy. Well, they look different each time. That's what I was wondering because I had a different one last time I played.
Who's winning? Oh, I didn't talk to this lady yet. That's why.
Rooster's
There's
winning.
a mysterious guy in the back of the shop. See, oh wait, the rooster's winning.
Yep.
What did you go for?
A rooster.
Yay! Yeah, they do. Okay.
I'll get some eggs.
Oh, so that's an easy win then, because. So the next one that's gonna win is gonna. Yeah, I think it rotates. So the next one is gonna be the scorpion again, probably.
Here's your prize! Yay! So now I have 31 eggs again. I can buy another mystery box. I don't know.
Nice.
What else to buy?
What? Isn't there more? Is that it? Is that all the things we can buy?
No, you can come into the shop and actually talk to Sandy in the blue building. It triggers like the event.
Blue bill. Oh, what about there's a little spooky guy up here.
And you can actually buy stuff from her here.
Oh. I want the dark velvet bow. That's the one I want. I need
you need to go into the blue building.
Blue. Come on, Scorpion, win. I need more eggies.
Bouncer's not gonna let me in.
Go to sleep, Shibroman. Go to sleep.
Shibroman.
Yes, come on, Scorpy. Scorpy, let's go. Scorpy, run, you fool.
Oh yeah, we should have just kept betting the whole time and buy everything.
Well, I bet wrong now. The crab won again, so it's not perfect.
Oh, there's a wiggle spot.
Mono, do you have 3 more eggs? Mono.
Oh? Oh yeah, I do.
Can I maybe?
If I can give them to you, yeah, I'll try. If it lets me. Let's see. Nope, not gonna let me give them to you.
No. Okay.
I'm trying. It won't let me. Can I build anything? Can I build a chest? I don't have wood. I can't build a chest.
Wait, can we get wood? No.
Let's say if I could build a chest, put them in a chest, then I can give you the eggs. Right. But I think I can go buy wood, but then I have to buy wood with eggs.
No, that doesn't make. Oh wait, you have
500 wood. Here, hold on. Let me try. Let me try. Oh, I can only buy 1 piece per egg. Forget that.
Fuck no.
God. The ripoff artist.
It is.
What did I buy last time? I bought,
You bought the mystery boxes.
yeah, I wonder where that was. Where did I buy the mystery box at? For the camel
Wasn't
people,
it
I think?
here?
No.
No, it doesn't here.
No, not here. Is it the traveling cart? No.
I don't remember. What does the... Is this just a hospital?
Oh, it's here at the egg trader person.
Oh, that guy. This is the last day, isn't it?
Yeah.
I really need to win one more race because I need to get 3 more eggs.
I'm just gonna buy another mystery box.
Kingston.
Oh well.
Run, run, run.
Let's see. Where's my zoom? I need to adjust it. I feel like it's like causing issues.
What's causing issues?
Like when I lose the ability to do anything, like my controls aren't working or something.
Well, they have to run. It's a race, Timmy. Come on! Kingston,
No.
run! How else can I get, like, the eggs?
I don't know. I would give you the 16
Come on!
I have.
Yes!
But...
Kingston! Run! Run, bitch! Run! Run! Wait, no! Stop! Stop it! Run! Stop! Oh.
She throws her fishing pole at him. Good job there.
The freaking cactus one again.
Mixed seeds. I'll just buy a bunch of mixed seeds. I don't care.
Okay, last time I'm gonna. No,
Cause
that's it for this year. No. Fucker.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going into cave. Oh no, I just need 3 more. I want the bow.
Time to go home.
Oh, I can't get the bow just because of 3 lousy eggs.
That's sad.
Yes.
The little blue bow.
Yeah, it's a dark velvet bow. It is like, it looks like a little, bat, which is cute. Just bought 3 mystery boxes. Sad. Guess I'll get strawberry.
It's 12:30
or so.
12:30 by the way.
Spicy eel.
Just to let you know.
Coming, Mom.
You don't get like everything stolen from you.
I'm here. Babushka's home. Hello, my little. Wait, where are you? Why aren't you in bed, young lady?
I'm tending to the farm.
You can't. It's 1 a.m.
Okay. I'll take this void egg to bed with me.
Oh, babushka, babushka, babushka.
Oh, look at the pupper. No, I don't want to eat the egg. I was trying to pet the pupper.
Oh yeah, I already did. All the cats are in this house.
Better
All
luck
the
next
animals.
time, Momo. Yes, better luck next time. Is that Coca-Cola?
It is.
Coca-Colas. Oh, I didn't hit sleeps.
Oh shit. Oh, just in time. I think you just did it in time. Yes, you did. Woohoo!
I glitched the
system. That was nick of time.
Hopefully it won't crash this time, right?
Oh yeah. We're good. Wait. Still not good. Oh, we're good. We made it!
I don't want your rock.
Take it.
Nope.
I'll just wear the titty dress again.
This one.
What?
And I'll leave my beanie on. I need to check the silos and see how full they are.
Right. We need to do stuff now.
Not bad.
I mean, when there's suddenly 3 days of festival, it really fucks up your plans, honestly.
Oh my gosh, Bio! 38 months, smelly cat. I am not a smelly cat.
Smelly cat, smelly
Wait,
cat.
what?
Are you feeding you? Smelly cat.
Thank you so much for the sub, though, Bio. Thank you. You Momo singing. I gotta hit all the things.
All the hype, Mono.
Yeah. If I can pick up stuff, but I think my inventory's full. And the eggs won't let me pick up anything else.
Mono's tickling the cows again.
What?
I just hear.
Can't even walk. I'm in the chicken coop.
Oh. I don't know what that cow was going crazy for then. I wasn't even close.
I don't know. I got too much stuff to even.
In the way. Oh, Nitch was caught. No one caught him.
No. Gotta go get rid of stuff. We have problems on top of problems. Da, da, da. Too much stuff. There. We'll get rid of stuff. But how are you, Bio? What you up to? What you playing? Playing,
Raina's not
resting?
here.
No, Raina's not feeling well. She's not feeling well. She had a rough day at work.
Look, Mono,
it was a long day.
My cactus boyfriend is looking over at my house. It's actually pretty funny. He's like, why am I not... My lover is in there. Why is she not allowing me to come in? Why?
Yes. We were unable to obtain partners in life, so we have cactus boyfriends.
We're just lonely bitches.
We got them in the desert from some random person assigned us our mate.
He's just a very prickly person.
I'm here. I'm falling asleep. Aw, you're sleepy.
What's your sleepy baby?
Sleepy Bio. It's early for you, though.
What time is it for Bio?
Probably 6
PM?
But yeah, but he's a night owl, so I don't know.
Are you Sickles?
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
Oh, 7:20.
Dun, 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 dun. Oh, there's still some eggs in here.
I'm carrying gold. Maybe I was preparing to bring away my pickaxe.
7:20. Yeah. So you're only an hour behind me.
Is it a gold bar, Mono? For the pickaxe?
I don't remember. Probably. It depends on which one you're on.
Yeah, well, I'm on steel. No, I'm not playing. I'm not playing Minecraft. It's Stardew.
Do you like our dresses, Bio? I could zoom in, probably. Let's see. Zoom in. Zoom, 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 zoom. There we go. We're gonna get up close on these jiggle physics here.
Jiggling. It's fitting for you, gremlins. Oi!
We have slime.
Wait, where are you? Where are you, Mono? Where are you standing?
In my house. In my bedroom.
I'll join
Momo.
you. We'll do the jiggle dance.
Join me in my bedroom, Momo.
Oh, yes. Wait, let me put away my gold.
Something is snacking. That's what she said.
Yeah. Jiggle, 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 jiggle. Jingle boobs, jingle boobs, jingle.
Stardew now has jiggle physics. Who knew? It's so messed up.
Let me see. Wait, what?
Let me see how far you can zoom. You go to settings and
all right,
click
zoom buttons. There we go.
It'll go up to 200%.
There we go. Oh, it's pretty far. Jiggle, 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 jiggle. Need some support.
Yeah.
So actually, they designed it to be a shirt of a slime, the top, and then they put in
the slime
the
shirt.
skirt with it.
The skirt
It really just looks like two granny boobies.
Yep. It did not help. Did not do it justice here.
It's so funny.
One
of your wine is done.
No. Tasty. I need some wine. I'll put that away, that away, that away. And...
No, don't leave the cage open, Momo. Oh, they almost got out again.
Momo keeps letting the animals out.
I want to set them free!
Momo, let the animals out.
Animals are supposed to be free.
There.
Are we selling all the mayonnaise and stuff?
Yes. Sell all the processed foods because they're worth more that way once they're processed. There's Momo's boyfriend, cactus boyfriend. He's got a big nose.
What are you?
He's got a really big nose, Momo.
He does.
Oh, this is what you call this, granny.
Is that what you call those granny boobs?
Ew, something like that. Just
You asked everybody for wine bottles, Timmy? Wait, when's your birthday? I have it in my calendar, but I don't know it by head.
Happy early birthday.
Mono, are you keeping all the void mayonnaise? Because there were 4 void mayonnaise in the
I usually try to keep like one of each in that thing that comes from that farm. Yeah, just in case for some reason when it's an item we end up needing, then I know what's over there.
Okay. And there's 5 large eggs. Superior in there. Do you want to make mayonnaise out of it?
Not the purple ones. The purple ones are better off to sell because they're more valuable that way.
Eggs? Yeah.
Yeah, I would just again keep one of each in the doohickey or like
and is the
bronze
little chest, is that a sell bin? Little chest is a sell bin?
Probably if there's one in there. There might be one in there. Yep. I didn't look.
There is.
I didn't look. That would have been easier earlier.
It's right next to the red chest.
No.
Okay. Chicken's done.
Silver done. Oh, I found wine. There's wine.
Oh, 9th of January. Oh, man. I know so many people that share that birthday.
Mama's a size queen.
Like, you are one of 3 friends of mine, Timmy.
Size queen.
So, wait. What is 9 months before 9th of January? Isn't that Valentine's or something? Are you a Valentine's kitty? Could be. I think so. Maybe? No, that's 10 months.
Does the coal go in here? Yeah. Oh, who took all the coal? Maybe we fired all the coal?
Oh shit, I have it. Sorry. I didn't put it back.
Mama's
Mono gonna be pissed. Mono gonna be pissed. Mono took all the coal.
Yeah, especially if you leave the game and don't ever play again, and you have all the coal.
No, you can find it. You can find it then. Jeez. I'm gonna get Spanx. Mono mad.
April. They need all the coal for my stockings. Yes, because you are a bad boy. I think I can milk and shear them in their sleep. I can't pet them, but I can milk them and shear them, which is great.
April is 9 months. Is there a special day in April that I'm unaware of? Why is everybody... Why is there so many people born on 9th of January?
Don't know. Oh crap, I was supposed to tell somebody happy birthday today. No, it's tomorrow. Okay, I got one more day.
Ooh. Lucky.
Yeah.
No, I actually know 4 people. Holy shit.
Yeah, I know like 3 right now in January.
On the 9th of No, I'm talking about one day in January. The 9th of January.
Oh, wow.
4 friends of mine are
April Fools.
born on that day.
April 9th.
The condom was like, April Fools!
Oh my.
Oh no, what if that's it? Yes.
It's getting deep in here.
I used protection, honey. 9 months later. April Fools! Oh, that would be so bad.
Oh.
Jingle balls, jingle balls, jingle
I don't want
balls.
to put the purple in there. I don't think you get purple cheese back, do you? Maybe you do. I don't remember.
Yeah, you can. You can, I think.
I just don't think you get silver cheese back, maybe.
Oh,
it's that time!
You should ask your parents. It's bedtime already?
Just about.
I'm coming. I'm coming, dear.
Oh my.
I'm bringing my saggy titties.
Mike.
I kicked it.
Oh,
sorry.
No, you're fine. I'm just dying laughing. We'll join you, madame.
Yes, saggy titties.
Oh, Coop Master, boost friend Coop animal coordinate shepherd, befriend a barn animals quicker.
Did you get something?
Yeah, farming. Do I want
up?
Coop or shepherd master? I guess Coop. I don't know. We'll go with it.
You always go for chickens a lot.
Cheekies. I want the blue chickens.
She likes the chicks and the dinos.
Yes. I'm going to not make a joke that I want to make. Oh boy.
Do it.
DM it to me.
Do it.
You can jump in my DMs bio.
Just do it. Oh, Mono, terrible. You actually have 2 bombs in your inventory.
Auto grabber. This thing can milk your cows and goats, shear your sheep, gather eggs. What? 25,000 gold? We can get an auto grabber? Hell yeah.
Nice, do it. Yes, let's go. Look at Mono keeping all the wine in her own chest. See that? Salmon berry, pomegranate, wild plum, orange. No, it's been there. I've had it before.
Oh, okay.
Auto grabber.
Then milks by cows?
Yes.
I don't remember
does
milking my
everything.
cows being a thing. Okay.
It milks, it
Hi.
takes the truffles, it shaves
Since
the
Momo
sheep.
says so, clearly the cows weren't the only thing being milked. Oh my.
He needs some milk!
Yup.
Good timing for that sound bite, Timmy.
I was just trying to relieve some pressure. There's too much weight.
Oh,
Oh, we have the 5 built cave carrots. We should make sure we put those in there. For the raccoons,
Momo
the 5
said
cave
too.
carrots.
Oh, that was the devil. The devil made me do it. Because it's horny.
But yeah, we have the 5 cave carrots for the raccoons.
Oh yeah. No, we need 5 but we also need
5 cave carrots and 5
purple.
mushrooms. Yeah, so I'm just saying don't eat the cave carrots.
You could already give them, I think.
Yeah, we can go ahead and drop those in there.
Yeah.
I'm just waiting until 9 to go get this auto doohickey from Marnie. Purchase supplies, milk pill, auto grabber.
Thank you for the stretch.
Oh my god! Can I do it?
Catch. Eat 1 cave carrot. No,
Oh,
Bio.
yeah.
No, how dare!
1 cave
How
carrot.
dare.
No, don't eat that cave carrot. Don't do it. The raccoons need the cave carrots. Oh, raccoons sticking out the top. I didn't notice that.
No, I'm coming to look. My
It's
titties are
sticking
coming
out
with
the
me.
I hope you don't leave them behind.
You're running and oh, I see it.
It's sticking out the top. It's so cute. There's a baby raccoon.
That's so cute. Hydrate, thank you. Oh no, hydrate.
Okay, hydrate. Milk is so good.
Mono. Don't be drinking my milk. No. We said we weren't going to do that on stream, Mono. No.
I'm on a farm. What are you doing?
No Mono milk.
So do I have to
Thank you. Don't trip over them. Down
Oh
on you,
no.
family.
Do
You
I have to put
decide
that
on your
on?
cow.
Yeah. Good things. Cow.
Yeah, Timmy keeps the sound bites.
I don't know if I have these in the right order, but we'll find out the next day.
I should have worn my immunity band when we went into the caves.
Immunity from what?
I don't know, it just says immunity. Immunity from tripping over the boobies.
I'm trying not to.
I mean, if you run and they go like, ooh.
Remember when you could trip in, what was it, Animal Crossing? You run around with a balloon and you trip and fall.
I never played.
But yeah, in Animal Crossing, you could run around and trip and fall and you lose your balloon. It's sad. But yeah.
That is sad.
Mm-hmm.
Where did the gold bars go? Gold bars?
Yeah.
Did you take the gold bars, Mono?
I have an inventory of bars that I carry with me everywhere, but do you need some? I have 13, so I have plenty to share.
Yes, please. Can I have 4 so I can make gold pickaxe?
Yes.
Yay.
See. Because I may have harvested them, I don't know. I see things, I harvest them.
Yeah, they were. I put them in the thingy indeed. Let's see if the fortune teller says.
Or was that when it crashed?
Oh, I shouldn't go do the Omni box today.
Let's see. There's nothing
Maybe,
in the
yeah.
cave.
No, there's no gold nuggets in the thing, so
Okay.
I'm guessing
Make them
those
up
were
here.
it.
Dun, dun, dun. All right, I'm gonna put half.
I only have to go out of bed at 3 p.m.
Half
Oh,
of
nice.
those. I put half my. I'll put half of
Now you
each
just
in there.
imagine the Naruto money, only the sagging boobies trailing behind instead of the arms. Yes.
Oh no.
Thank you, Mono.
You're welcome.
Oh, I mean, did you watch Dandadan yet?
Naruto reading. Terrified you. Oh god.
Oh no.
I didn't do it. I didn't do it.
Mono, what did you do?
Started chaos with our most favorite dresses. The bad thing is this outfit is just funny as heck, but the other outfit that I got was just so Legend of Zelda. I want to wear it, so I'm like perplexed. Which one do I wear? So right now I'm wearing my Zelda.
But you
hat.
can wear the hat. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wearing the hat because it matches.
Nice.
But the outfit is so cute too.
Shit, it's already 4 p.m. Too late to go to the Schmitty. Bark. We didn't even plant new things, Mono. It is the 19th. I bet we could still plant some things.
I know, we were slackers. Ouch, feet hurt.
Don't hurt yourself. Stop hurting yourself. I'll do that.
It's a bad habit. My circulation is off because I've been doing way too much manual labor lately.
Right. That makes sense.
Ugh. Normally I could sit on my feet no problem and they won't fall asleep for hours, but... What? My body's got the allergies. Do you even have
seeds? No. Mono needs some huggies and some massages.
Yes, I do. I need massages and hugs. And cuddles.
Are we spring or summer?
Who wants to cuddle?
Is it spring or Sodbuster? Who gave me my last name? Is that Sebastian's name? Sodbuster? No, I'm not married to him yet.
Move, chicken! Really? Rude!
Oh, it is spring. It is spring.
Don't you dare go to sleep right there. Move. Don't you dare go to sleep right there, chicken! Oh my god, you're gonna make me mad. Move.
Move, chick. Get out the way.
How can I make a chicken move? Chicken!
Kick it. Make it fly.
You know what? I could sell it. Sorry, Potpourri. You made me mad. You're gone.
The fact that it's even called Potpourri after that is just double the fun.
Right? You just made me mad, so I sold
Are we still
him.
doing the leak task? Oh. We have 12 days left. Yeah. We should buy leek seeds tomorrow, Mono. We might make it.
I don't think leeks are something you can buy. I think you have to forage them.
Oh, right. Hello there, mother.
Oh, right, we've been bad.
I'll go to the forest and see if there's any wild growth.
Okay. In the morning or now?
Now.
I can go
already on my way.
I can go on top if you go down below.
How was your nap, mother? I said that mid-laugh. Because I just heard what you said.
She says she's going to the bottom. I'm going to top. Like...
Mono is a top, confirmed. No.
Never know.
Oh, the jiggle and the giggle physics are on.
Yep. Jiggle giggles. It's officially jiggle giggle season.
Wait, artist, what do you think of our jiggly booby dresses?
Oh yeah. Our booby dresses.
Jiggle, 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 jiggle.
Yep. I've laughed way too much tonight. I think my mouth hurts.
Look. Boop, 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 boop. Boop, 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 boop.
Hey, that's what Emily dresses in. It's not our fault. It's Emily's fault. She gave us matching booby dresses. So yeah.
She did. She was like, "Oh, it's a cute slime dress," and we were like, "Wait, it looks like saggy boobs."
Yeah, totally not a slime dress.
See? Look at tit.
Oh my gosh. I need help.
I deserve a slap for that one. I'm sorry.
Save me, Mama. Or save me, artist. I said save me, Momo. I forgot who I needed to save from.
I'm gonna make some bean wine. What about cheese wine?
I can beat down cheese wine.
I can't. Doesn't work. How dare you slap me, Timmy? I said Mono could. No, you're fine. You're fine.
Who's slapping my woman?
My woman. Look, my top is speaking right now. No. Oh no.
Can't take us anywhere together. Thank goodness we live a world apart.
Imagine walking in a store together, just being like darp, darp, darp.
All the silly jokes. I haven't done any garbage hunting this entire stream. That's not like my raccoon panda self. Trash panda self, yeah.
Yep, Mona's not being a good trash panda.
I'm not. Oh, it's 12:30 at night.
We should sleep.
I
should put the coal back before Mono.
Why won't they let me back in at 12:30 at night? Ah, yeah. Please return the coal, ma'am.
Let's see what type of weather it is tomorrow. A beautiful sunny day. The worst.
Yeah.
This is not how real life is. Usually I'm in bed later than Mono, but in this game I managed to get in there before she does. Or I just don't go to bed at all.
Yo. I just deposited all my medals. Oh well.
I'll deposit your medal.
I didn't
Oh no! Time for bed! Bed!
Okay.
You're gonna pass out.
I had extra weight on me today. I couldn't make it.
It's the physics. It's
weighted down. I got too heavy.
She ran and her boobs went.
Ooh, I can craft big bombs now.
Nice. She slapped herself in the face with the titties.
Yeah.
She was running too damn hard.
Alright, this will be the last day.
Yes. I need to go to store. Why do the spirits keep being annoyed? I can't even get my the geodes done.
You okay over there?
I'm not running. Yeah. Timmy just did all the slaps and the things again. Keep getting slapped, but I'm such a good girl. I don't know why.
Good girl. Mama's a good girl. Dragon
A dragon hair!
Oh, catch! Beautiful baby! I'm gonna go fix
I want
the
a
leak.
dragon.
I'll be
You're gonna fix a leak?
Give George a leak.
Oh! Those leaks! I thought because of the leak at Timmy's place, I'm so confused.
Yeah, I'm gonna go fix one at Timmy's place. Yeah, I'll be right over.
She's just gonna fly over to Nellens to fix Timmy's sink for
knocking her house.
That was the sound. The slaps. That's the sound you'll hear.
I'm not
That's
even.
the one.
I about went too far. I'm not even.
Oh, I found one.
She went on.
There's a wild leek. So maybe there's more now.
Probably. Probably that time of year. We probably just have to hunt for them.
Your laundry machine, that was it. Yep. Okay, let's see. Maybe maybe it's in the mixed seeds.
My laundry machine.
Oh my god,
All three of us caught it.
Yeah,
No,
and
come
ours
right
got a
in.
shiny. Ours got a
What?
shiny.
Ours, you got
Yes.
a shiny? No way. You got a shiny one?
She did.
Are they pink? I
Oh,
think the shiny
GG.
ones are pink.
I don't know.
I think the shiny ones are pink.
Yeah, I don't see.
It only took me all stream to put that truffle mushroom in the museum.
We're so
Rigged?
productive.
It is rigged. How did you get a shiny and we didn't?
Yeah,
Totally
okay.
rigged.
There's no leek seeds. But they are a part of the mixed seeds, I think. Aren't they? Hello, Sebastian.
Yeah. That's yeah, I'm
Rigged.
I think it's weird.
Mono.
Mm-hmm.
Aren't the leeks part of the mixed seeds, and don't we have like loads of them?
Oh, they probably
Oh my
are.
god! Anyone who ships 100 cauliflowers, we should have done
I
that
didn't think about that.
before.
Yeah, because
There's a crop order of 100 cauliflowers.
we got 8 days left. I don't think we have 100 though.
No,
I've been
we
selling
sold
them
already.
too, so yeah.
Same. And there's a spirit made out of potatoes that really packs a wallop. Mind dropping a few taters into a keg and bringing me a batch or two. So she wants
Nice.
vodka. I think we have some taters. We can make vodka.
Pyong, 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 die already!
Artist spoke to the spirits.
Yes.
Upgrade tools. I want the gold
Die.
pickaxe.
Die, because I need to do things and stuff and you're in my way.
I'm sorry.
Fuck you.
Sorry, mommy.
Oh. Wow.
Wow.
Somebody's being a naughty girl tonight.
Cringing myself out, but it's fun.
It's all just for fun.
Shits and giggles. Look, the seagulls are pooping in the water. That was a seagull. That was not Mono, that was a seagull. Ah!
Seagulls? Yeah,
I said
Mono the seagull.
I said seagull, so you went ah! So that was kind of funny.
So are you planting mixed seeds then to get those leeks?
I'm going back to the house right now.
Okay.
I just emptied the beach from the Cheryl.
The beach.
Beach. Son of a beach.
Yeah.
The kid has Fortnite going. And boy has some... Tell him to turn it down. Or wear earbuds or something.
Yeah.
You gotta teach him.
That's driving me batty.
I remember playing, you know,
I don't like this.
on the
Too many.
on a portable console as a kid, and I never played it with super loud music. Didn't really like that either. Yes, there's enough leeks. Oh no, it's fucking spring onions. Okay, the forest only has spring onions, sadly.
Yeah.
I thought there were so many leeks.
No, don't shoot me with your stuff.
Gotta clip that. I'm sorry. I gotta clip that. I got it. Where is the clip button? Where the fuck is the clip button?
I know.
There's a leak. There's a leak in the boat. Look, a leak. Yeah, Mono, I'm sorry. That was just some bad timing there. No idea what happened. Well, basically, I just heard Mono go, "No, don't shoot me with your stuff."
I know nothing.
Oh, that was good. Oh, crying. Mono, my word. Yeah, she's filthy. She's filthy. Mm-hmm.
I wasn't even thinking
Save that
about
for
it.
later.
I said drunk or I said it. Oh, okay. Okay, yes, ma'am.
It's not a trap. It's very, very real to me.
Trap. Later, ooh la la.
We now have 2 leeks.
I ran out of bombs.
Where are the seeds?
Gonna find the mixed seeds. Probably in the seed
Yeah.
chest.
Which one is the seed chest?
The one that doesn't have the vegetables in it by the garden?
No. I think there's no more seeds then.
Did we plant them all? Okay.
Plant them all. I'm just
or
gonna
are
check
they in the greenhouse? They might be in the greenhouse.
Could be.
Because I think there's seeds in there too. Oh shoot! Crap! Go. Run.
I remember seeing them somewhere, but I don't know where.
I don't know.
I wish there was like a chest with all the things.
I have 4 whole mixed seeds, but I don't think that's gonna help you.
Probably not. Maybe Rain has some.
Let me see if there's some in this chest real quick before I leave. Nope.
I'm just checking all the chests I find. No, that's deluxe bait.
No, I don't want to eat the daffodil. But stop.
Daffodil? Let's see if there are seeds. Yeah, mix flower seeds, so that's not it.
No.
Damn it.
Those are the new ones I got, probably.
Them all.
Okay, well, I'll come plant my 4 little seeds I got in the dungeon.
All the coffee is done already again.
Dog's asleep. Planted my 4 little dungeon seeds.
Noise. Why is this peach sapling not sown? Do we need a... No, we can just put it in the floor, right? Oh, but they need to be spaced out. I think that was it. Okay, never mind. I'll put it back in there. What is that thing? Is that a seed maker or is that an oil? Oh, that's an oil maker, isn't it?
Depends on which one you're looking at.
It's a triangle.
Oh, I think that's the
thing.
seed. I think it's the seed maker. I think you put fruit in it and you get seeds.
Why don't we put the leek in it?
Oh, you can try.
Yeah, we're not gonna make it anyhow, I think. Maybe.
Well, you got 8 days. How long do they take to grow?
No clue. Okay, I'm gonna take one leek and I'll put it in the seed maker.
I'm trying to harvest as many weeds as I can to get mixed seeds.
Right, that's where they come from. Yes. Let's try. Put it in the seed maker.
Weeds.
No, doesn't work. Doesn't it work?
I have two more seeds.
Woo!
I'm trying.
Do you use the sword or the...
I'm using the scythe. You can use the sword too, but I think it might take more energy from you.
It might, and you don't get hay. So...
Oh, well, you don't want to do it in the grass anyway. You want to come down here and do it in the forest, in the weeds.
Ah, it's the weeds. Right.
Not grass, weeds.
Right.
And I've been doing grass to help our hay, but I don't want to kill all our grass.
No, I did it randomly. I know how to do it like, randomly, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, it's nearly time again, though.
Midnight? What's that?
Midnight. Yes,
oh, I just heard a raccoon.
All the jams are done. Oh, that was me. I think.
Momo's a raccoon. Confirmed. She's a trash panda.
I am.
She is a trash panda. Confirmed.
Put it in.
You know, we need to make notes on what we're doing right now because we're not going to remember next time we were working on this.
Saving leeks. We have to make vodka for Pam, 2 servings.
She wants vodka now? She's upgraded. Jeez.
Yeah, she's like, I've heard about some strong stuff. Oh, we need, wait, 12 batches? 12?
Okay,
I just we don't have enough for that. We need potato seeds.
All the seeds I had. And I'm heading to the bed.
Thank you.
So I planted more seeds.
Kimono. Jiggle, jiggle. Jiggle, jiggle, Kimono.
Oh my.
Jiggle, jiggle, I got a peach for you. Jiggle, jiggle. I was actually holding a peach. I couldn't not make that comment.
A peach. She is holding a peach. God.
Oh, I leveled up. Level up, level up. Mona's made it to bed. Safe and sound. Oh, the book's
the time to sleep.
Yeah, should be, but.
Yep. New strong stuff. Oh, that was what it was. Eggs and potatoes. There's golds that I didn't collect, but it'll be alright. I should sleep.
Whoa, yeah. What was that?
My alarm.
Wow, that was
you
loud.
have to return to a normal sleep schedule because you're gonna do this thing called work. Oh,
that's what you made the alarm sound.
Yeah.
Oh wait,
so actually go.
Yeah, I'm trying to exit the game. There we go. Exit.
Yeah.
This was lots of fun. I like the duel thing.
It was lots of fun. We'll have to do it again somehow. It was definitely fun. Thank you guys for hanging out and lurking and watching and listening.
Thanks for
putting up with our shenanigans. So
and our errors and you know the stream errors and whatnot. Camera fuzzies and purple blurples and
blurples.
Purple
Lime
blurples,
shirts.
titties.
Oh yeah, thank you guys for hanging out.
Mono always
watching. Mono always what?
You always go the neat way, and then I come with saggy tits.
Yes.
She went with slime shirts.
I was trying to be PG. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not though.
Nope.
Okay. Mwah. Mwah.
Alright. Good night, all.
Good night, sweethearts. And sweet dreams. You too, Mono.
Yes. Y'all take care. I gotta find my buttons to push.
Another button to button.
Yeah. Pushing all my buttons. Okay.
Stop slapping me, Tim. I'm going to bed. Don't wake me up. No.
Don't wake me up. Oh my gosh,
Okay.
what are we gonna do?
Okay, last high five.
Yes. This side. There we go. Fight. Yeah,
Stop
fight.
slapping my titties. No.
I was punching them.
You were like, oh, I got another slap.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, my cheeks are hurting from all the laughter. This was fun.
I don't mean to massage them.
Sure, wait, no. Ouch, ouch. Oh.
Ouch. Alright, we
It
love so
hurts.
much. It hurts. So, we will catch you guys later. Thank you for hanging out. Thank you for lurking. Thank you for being here, everyone. Good night,
everybody.
all. Bye.
See you the next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.